I'd like to welcome everybody to the October 21st, 2024 Select Board meeting. We're going to do a call to order, roll call.
Artikoff here.
Campiello here.
Gibson here. Sakosha here. Do I have a motion to?
I'd like to make a motion to enter a non-public session for purposes of personnel and legal.
Second. Ooh, roll call.
Artikoff, aye.
Campiello, aye.
Gibson, aye. Sakosha, aye.
There's a motion to go into non-public.
Purposes of personnel and legal. Okay.
Perfect.
Mantrick here
Don't
too.
pay the rent. Back again. Back?
I will entertain a motion to exit non-public and enter public.
Second.
Roll call.
Aye.
Hardikoff, aye.
Capello, aye.
Gibson, aye.
Sakoshai. Welcome, everybody, to the October 21st, 2024 Select Board meeting. We've already had a roll call, so let's all stand, rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I would also like to entertain a motion to seal the non-public material for 6 months for legal.
I would make that motion.
Second.
Roll call.
Aye.
Hardikoff, aye.
Capello, aye.
Gibson, aye.
Sakoshai. Okay, agenda review and approval.
I have one proposed addition.
Okay,
I'd like to propose the addition of the issuance of a building permit on Finney Way, which is a private road, map 256, lot 2. This is an application that went before the planning board twice. The town failed to notice the abutters and add it to the agenda in time, but it did go through the requisite parts of the process before. And I'd propose to add that as public hearings and invited guests D.
Second that. I would move that adjustment.
to make a motion to approve the agenda review and approval as amended.
Yes.
I
With that
second
amendment.
that.
Roll call.
And sure. Aye.
Hardikoff, aye.
Capello, aye.
Gibson, aye.
Sakoshai. Public hearings, or actually public comment. If there's anybody in studio online, up to 3 minutes, up to 15 minutes in total. There's 2 public comment sessions.
If you're participating online, you can raise your hand, or if you're on your phone, press *6. Be another opportunity at the end of the meeting.
Okay, nothing online or in studio, so we're going to go ahead and close public comment. And we are on to public hearing and invited guests. Is the school board liaison? Do we have one here tonight?
Thank you. I'm not sure where my partner in crime is. She usually does all the talking, but it's okay. Actually, I think she had a prior commitment, but anyway, us, the school board, like you folks, we got kind of a little bit of a quick blush of our budget. We got our budget binders on Friday. Initial budget shows about a 9.5% increase with nothing cut off it. I apologize. I should have brought some more of the information with me, but tuition, high school tuition took a pretty good hit. School transportation took a pretty decent hit. The big pieces you're seeing were all big hits. I'm not sure how much of that we're going to be able to, before this is over with, how much of that we're going to be able to mess with. We're a lot of this stuff in the school budget, when it really comes down to what we actually have an ability to make cuts to, is a very small percentage of the budget. It's a lot like the town budget. You know, there's pieces that are there, they're fixed, and if you need to cut super big numbers out, it starts taking people away. So again, I'm not sure how much we're going to be able to take out, but we have a budget workshop tomorrow night, first one for the season, and then we get a week off, and then we'll get back into budgets and other stuff again, and that'll take us all the way through kind of pretty close to the same time frame that the town operates on, and get into our public hearing after the first of the year. One of the things that the board did talk about was in part of the collaboration, some of the things we're working on with as a collaboration committee is the district is going to acquire salt and sand from the town. Whether or not, I'm not sure how we're going to do that, whether that will go with the staff at the SAU will send a truck over and pick the stuff up and haul it back, or if they'll work with Mark and ask Mark to bring a load or two down to fill a salt shed, and it's also our intention to go back to using fuel at the highway garage. Again, we probably, to put it in perspective, I think last year they spent about $5,000 or $6,000 maybe on gas and diesel. But the bigger issue is that, at least from my perspective, this is my personal opinion, I'm not speaking for the board per se, but you know, the cards we have are at the mobile station, and the mobile is the most expensive gas in town, and we're not, and I think that's primarily because that's really the choice we have. I don't think Irvin offers a gas card, if you will. So, again, looking at it purely from the perspective of, does it save the taxpayers money? In Rick Walker's humble opinion, it doesn't, because whether it comes out of, whether the left hand pays for it or the right hand pays for it, we're paying for it. So, but I think it's a, you know, and again, I'm speaking for myself, a small victory in the fact that we're not, you know, that we don't pay the over the road taxes for the fuel, and we don't pay, I don't think we pay a gas tax either, do we?
Right.
So that in itself saves the taxpayers money, because we're paying them taxes when we buy it from a private vendor. So that was one of the things people that saw me running for position in the school board, was to primarily look at ways that we could find ways to go back to working together that would ultimately benefit all the taxpayers in town. And like I say, at the end of the day, the little bit of money in the grand scheme of you know, a $30 million school budget and a $10 million town budget, $8,000 or $10,000 is pretty minuscule, but it's a huge victory in the fact that going back to the way we did it 3 or 4 years ago ultimately saves us and taxpayers a little bit of money, allows that money to be reallocated in some other way.
Or not spent at all.
Or not spent at all.
Yeah.
I'm looking over some of the stuff we talked about at the meeting the other night. I'm not gonna say them because I'm gonna get them wrong, but we don't know what Dover's tuition will be. We're about another 2 or 3 weeks before that's out. I did get the Oyster River tuition. It's in my budget binder at home, and it's around $21,000 a student. We expect Dover to be around 20, and Brown usually is $1 less than Oyster River. So
And that's up from 18 and 19.
Yeah. So again, when you start to look at when the first page we see on the budget binder is, here's what the increase is and here's why it's that way, and then we look at, oh, okay, I guess when you look at, they're all big ticket items. It's not little stuff. So it'll be interesting to see where we go coming through the budget process. We did agree that we're going to participate with the voters guide, much like the town does. We've got 2 contracts that are up this year. We have to vote on the Oyster River and the Dover High contract. I say we, the voters will have to vote on that in March. And it's important to get good information out to the people, and the fact that, excuse me, if the voters were not to support either one of those contracts, then by default, all the Barrington students would go to Dover High. So it's important for folks to understand. Last spring we did a I call it a workshop, but it's information session, and we brought the 3 high schools in. And it was well attended by both parents that have kids that are either in the programs or going to be, but it was also reasonably well attended by interested taxpayers. And we wanted people to understand, why Barrington runs a program that gives people a choice. And there's things that if you're a student in one of the other high schools, and you want some vocational stuff that them schools don't offer, chances are Dover does offer it. So they would, in most cases, would get shipped from either Oyster River or Brown down to Dover to be able to participate in some of the programs, and vice versa. If there's programs that kids from Dover want that is not available in one of the other schools, then and with Dover being the other piece of that is the Dover students. The students have the opportunity if Spalding has career technical classes that are not offered in Dover, then there's arrangements made where they will transport the kids up for that part of the program.
So you're saying we don't need to have a contract with all of those schools to have that happen?
Correct. Dover is, for lack of a different way of putting it, is Barrington's school of choice or default school.
School of record, yep.
School of record, sorry, thank you. But because a number of years ago, the district chose to listen to the voters and give the voters an option of sending kids to the 3 different schools, that's in place now. And for anybody that may or may not have heard any rumors floating around that the school district was trying to remove themselves from 1 or 2 of the schools, there's not been one thing said at a school board meeting or anything publicly stated by the school board that indicates anything like that. So none of the 5 of us have any idea where it came from. So if people have heard rumors out there, that's really what they are.
Haven't heard a thing.
And I think that's it. I think I'm sorry, we talked about the back gate. We gave them a little bit of history of the back gate at the elementary school. There are a number of residents on that road that have been there for more than the 25 years ago that I was on the board that remind me on a pretty regular basis that I may or may not have said over my dead body, are people going to be able to drive through there? So
Have they checked in on you to see if you're doing okay?
Yes, actually,
Yeah.
one of them came, checked on me, says, I just want to make sure you really were alive because I see people driving through there. But it is part of the plan to allow parents the ability to exit during drop-off so they can go out through there. But the board has recognized the issue and is taking a more proactive stance to closing the gate when it's not supposed to be being used. We don't have any evidence that people are using it as a cut-through. It's not saying it's not happening, but we don't have any evidence of that. And that's a concern of mine. If somebody figures out that, boy, if I cut out through there, cut through the school parking lot, if I go through there 30 miles an hour and there's nobody dropping somebody off, I can pass 4 cars that I wouldn't have passed, and then all of a sudden that one kid does come out of the car and run toward the school. That can be a problem. So we recognize that piece of it. Again, I'm shooting from the hip. I didn't spend a lot of time today. I was busy doing a lot of other stuff, but the board talked about the school signs, and we voted the other night to have the chairperson sign the letter that you folks agreed to, and I think that we want to. We kind of talked with Deanna to have some conversations with Connor about what's the best way to pay for that.
Excellent.
Any questions for me?
October 1st enrollment numbers. Isn't October 1st the date for the school that I think Carrie gave beginning of school year numbers, but, oh, you think you have
I
those?
might have them with me. I might have the numbers that they,
Those are just always helpful, especially with the demographic study that the school had performed last year that the town funded part of. Being able to track actual enrollments against those projections becomes pretty helpful.
so
That's what
as
the
of,
state pays on too.
as of
Right.
10/8, enrollment at the elementary school was a total of 407 children, broke down in first
Excuse me,
grade.
Chief, 470 or 407? Okay, thank you.
407.
93 in the first grade, 88 in the second grade, 114 in the third grade, and 112 in the fourth grade. And
No increase.
Can I have those numbers again, Chief?
Sure,
You said
absolutely,
first
because I
grade?
probably said it, I probably put it up. 93 in first grade.
Yeah?
88 in second grade.
Mm-hmm.
114 in third grade,
Ah,
and 112 in fourth grade.
I wonder if there's the effect of the state monies that you can take privately. If that's affecting.
I don't know. We'll love a thing to study.
We're averaging in the ECLC 94% of the kids are there every day, and we have no students that have missed 5+ days since the beginning of the year. And the elementary school and the middle school track about the same numbers. They're probably 95, 96%. Enrollment for the middle school, 406, 98 in fifth grade, 100 in sixth grade, 100 in seventh grade, and 108 in eighth grade. And average daily attendance rate is 94.5%.
That's a really good attendance rate.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
And they have 3 students that would be on the 5-day thing, which,
In enrollment at ECLC, did I miss that?
and that is, I thought I had all of them. All right, so the 2024 enrollment, 50 kids in the preschool at the ECLC and 189 in kindergarten. So we have a total enrollment right now of 1,376 kids. That was based on the October 1st count there.
So the high school enrollment is 1376 minus 406 minus 407
Right.
minus
High school
89.
high school students is, right now is 424. I'll
Yep,
save you a little
that math checks out. Yeah.
Perfect.
So just to check how that compares to the projection, I just found it while we were going through the numbers. So we're in the 24-25. The projection for, okay, so they combine K to 4, and they leave out preschool. So let me do 89 plus 407. The projection was 506, and we're actually at 496. So 10 fewer students, or no, 502, and we're at 496. So 8 fewer students. Sorry, I can do math. 6 fewer students. All right, excuse me. I'm give me a chance on 5 to 8. Okay, 5 to 8 was projection of 396. Actual is 406. So that's 10 more. And then projection for 9 to 12 was 441, and we're at 424.
Thank God.
So high school enrollment continues to drop because the projections showed it dropping.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. So total enrollment is down about 15 kids.
Co-Brown admits that, they're struggling enrollment-wise. They could certainly take more kids than what they have, and would certainly like to have more of our kids. And, and Oyster River is showing their numbers are going to go down, and Dover expects the same.
So based on this, is there still on the CIP the request for Classroom expansions?
Yes. Yes. So the issue, we've had some discussions about that, nothing, and no formal discussions in a meeting about it, but walking through the buildings and stuff. And I think it's important to understand that the bigger issue with adding classroom space at the elementary school really is geared more toward the direction that you're going in educating kids and really needing more space for
Individualized services.
Right. And something I didn't realize is that as kids progress through the program, typically by the time they get to high school, they're out of the program, if you will. There are some that will need specialized services, but a lot of the kids that receive help through their elementary years and middle school years, they're able to get to a spot where the numbers in high school are lower. And I think a little bit of that is that the younger they are, sometimes they struggle at learning because maybe they're not getting as much help at home as they might otherwise get. So it creates a little bit more in the younger ages, getting them into school, and then as they start to progress through the program, they start to catch up a lot. But I think what, I've encouraged the board to look at that if legitimately the district needs to go to the voters and ask for additional space, that explain to the voters very clearly why that is. That, and in some respects, there's specialized programs that we do that other districts like the city of Rochester and some other communities have actually said to the town of, to our school district, we'll send some kids to you and we'll pay the tuition for them. The problem is that we don't have the space or the staff to take any more on. So what we're kind of looking at is that, I think it's important to be able to explain to the people in our town that are, obviously we foot the bills whenever we want to do something, is that we be able to explain to the taxpayers that if they supported, growing the schools or providing more space in the schools, that there's a benefit in the fact that we'll hire the staff to operate this and we'll tuition in kids that will help offset the.
Casey?
So I think it would be important, based on the two statements that you just made, that to approach the voters as transparently as possible, showing them the backup data that shows that children age out of those intended services for their individualized IEPs, and also showing the voters that a potential shift in revenue could occur with those additional spaces. I think that data becomes very important when we're looking at declining enrollment instead of increased enrollment.
Yep.
And I think providing voters with a full breakdown of what those individual education plans may mean for a child and what individualized services would look like if we had the additional spaces to have occupational therapy set up and have, I think those are, if we're going to do a voter guide, I think that's right.
I think it makes, I also think when you bring in this up is looking at some of the things that you folks are going to talk about as far as big dollar projects that the town itself may be staring down the barrel at. That I think it means, to me, it means even more to be able to, for the town and the school to collaborate together and look at what it is. I mean, I think it would be pretty tough, and I'm going to throw crazy numbers out there, but it would be pretty tough for the town to put up pick an X number of $1 million bond for road infrastructure, and at the same year, have the school put a X number of dollar addition onto the thing. Most taxpayers are gonna sit there and go, now, wait a minute, so my simple math tells me that my tax bill is gonna go through the roof because, the town or the school is sitting there, well, it's only if you support this, it's, it's this much on your tax bill, and the other side says the same thing. So I think it's even more important, and it's kind of what I pushed for last year, to say that, and I still very strongly believe in the concept of a joint budget committee, because I think that's how you get that information out to the voters. I think it's important for the school board and the select board to sit down and have conversations about this and make sure that we're not coming after the taxpayers double barrel and nobody gets anything. So,
I just put up the slide of the last year's enrollment and the projections for this year. It looks like preschool is 22 students less than projected. Kindergarten is 11 students less than projected. Elementary school is 13 less than projected. Middle school is 2 more, and high school is 10 more. The important thing about that high school is that 10 more, it equates to like $200,000 because of the tuition costs. So yeah, interesting. I appreciate you sharing the data. I didn't know you had it with you. You're more prepared than you thought.
It's because they gave it to us last week and I didn't take it out of my book. So
We won't tell.
all right, thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Okay, next up under public hearings and invited guests, we have the issuance of a building permit on Holiday Lakeshore Drive, a private road for Karen Gould, map 261, lot 59.
So this is before the select board a second time. At the last meeting, the select board appropriately requested additional details regarding the scope and cost estimate for the work proposed to be done to bring the road to the full standard in the Class 6 private road building policy. You have that additional document in your packet, and I had the road agent review that additional scope, and I have his comments in my town administrator report. He makes clear that to accomplish the scope means removing trees, means widening the road, and there may be private property implications to those, which will be the responsibility of the applicant to resolve. What the town is saying in considering this is that it has to be brought to the standard. It doesn't absolve the applicant of their responsibility to do the work and make the agreements necessary to bring it to the standard. That the applicant is encouraged to coordinate closely with the road association with that work.
Any discussion, board?
Just that this was a really unusual case because of the history of it, which was certainly not usually how things are done, but we did.
Probably not. It depends on the terms of the access easement or right-of-way language. Some of that includes, depending on how wide it's laid out. But again, the important part is that's between the applicant and the private property owners and the road association. That's their responsibility.
Should we issue building permit? And actually be I feel we have a responsibility building permit, but the road has not been brought. And the private owner of those trees has not agreed to allow the expansion at that hairpin turn. The home will already be built and the road will not be able to be expanded. Shouldn't we get...
Is your microphone muted?
Sorry. Shouldn't we get them to provide written agreement that they would allow that to be
Yeah, we haven't in the
limbed?
past. We haven't required that in the past. We can certainly consider requiring that now or in the future. I mean, if we're going to require that consistently, then we should change the policy. We do that with the roads that are on the attachment B of the policy. So those are roads that have deficiencies that we feel are so significant that those deficiencies are required to be fixed before a building permit is issued. So they still start going through this process, but we say that you actually have to fix the road before you start construction. in part because we want to make sure fire trucks can get out to the property when it's under construction. So what you're proposing would be almost to take all of the applications and require the road improvements prior to issuing the building permit.
I'm proposing that the person who wants to build the home has to approach the person with the tree that's going to be limbed and get permission to limb it in order to allow a proper turn.
So do we have any more discussion on that, or do we want to entertain a motion, or?
I think Tracy has a good point here that we can say, let's do that, but we haven't gotten, people on the tree may object to that. They refuse to let it be done. Then we've already issued the permit.
Yeah, and that's
I don't know, personally, I don't know that it has to be done, but we have to see that there's an agreement that it can be done.
I think the red list certainly should require that before building permits. I think if acceptable, it could be on a case by case. If there are complicating issues or concerns about something being able to be accomplished, requesting it, if we have that way to make that.
Yeah, the select board can certainly ask for anything. I mean, you're just saying that you haven't asked for that before, which doesn't mean that you can't change your practice and ask for it going forward. I think that if we're going to consistently ask for it going forward, we should amend the policy to make clear what is satisfactory to the select board.
I don't know that I'm sorry. Go
No,
ahead.
but I think you're probably going to question exactly what
I have not seen the number of opposing abutters as we have seen in the issuance of this particular building permit, and they spoke very eloquently about how, why, where, what their objections were. And if we're going to do our due diligence, I feel like a simple letter from the people, the one tree, I mean, it's listed here as part of the 15,000 in work. The overgrown saplings and trees removed in the swale area, which I assume is also where that hairpin turn. But
They're a
well,
couple
regardless.
of different areas, but
so she's got a quote for it, but without permission to do it, cannot accomplish this work. And I think that's very different than what we have seen prior to this when an issuance of a building permit has come before us. We have an entire room filled with people that are expecting us to do the right thing.
So the most recent time something similar happened was on Cottage Lane, right? So the property owner at the end of Cottage Lane wanted to make improvements to the home, and part of the scope proposed in improving the road was removing a large tree, which is on a budding piece of property, right? So through the process, that budding property owner wasn't willing to grant permission, and the applicant changed his scope, reduced his scope as such. The select board wasn't involved in that. The select board didn't ask for proof of permission. And so the expectation is that it happens between the applicant and the property owners. The teeth that this policy has is the issuance of a certificate of occupancy, that if the road improvements aren't made, there won't be a certificate of occupancy issued. If the select board wants to add as insurance to an eventual issuance of a certificate of occupancy, that permission be provided proactively for any work that's done either on the road or not on the property owner's property, we can certainly request that. If you'd like to request it now, I just ask that you be specific. And if that's the intention to ask for it in the future, then I'll bring forward a policy amendment so we can make those requirements clear.
How does the board feel?
I would support doing it for this application because of the concern of abutters on this, and then in the future evaluate that for a full policy. But I'm not requesting the policy be changed.
For future ones, there are times when road improvements are perhaps delayed or seasonal or something that we might want to be able to have building done and know that the road's going to get done. And so I think we need to have flexibility to say that all the road does not have to be done before the building permit. Certainly maybe before the occupancy, but in this case, I think it should be before the permit.
You think, so your opinion is that the road should be improved before the permit, or that we see proof of permission to improve the road? I understand the difference between those two items.
That we receive permission for the inside curve that may be on private property. I mean, to me, that's like eminent, you can't just take someone's property and
And we're
expand the
not,
road.
so the town isn't granting anybody permission to take somebody's property.
Totally understand
I
that.
think a nuanced part of this also is a lot of these roads, and this probably is a one of the best examples of this. I don't think that you could pay a surveyor to determine exactly where this road is in the field. Partially because the layouts that have been required or been utilized in the past reflect roads that go through people's homes, where homes are built. And so the language that the road agent used, hey, out of an abundance of caution, you want to make sure that you have cooperation of the people listed, but we're not requiring that surveys of the road work be performed, that a stamped surveyed plan of the road layout and improvements proposed be provided. And I guess at the end of the day, that's really the only way we could be sure that the improvements that are proposed are being built on road either owned by the association or owned privately with a right-of-way access. So we would need to figure out how we would contemplate that, and to include this case.
So, in addition, I mean, could the board, vote in favor pending permission from this potential private landowner?
As long as you're clear about what constitute permission from your perspective. If it's a letter from the landowner granting permission to make improvements that may or may not be on their property, or trim trees that may or may not be on their property.
I would be comfortable with that. The letter.
I would too.
Do I hear a motion?
Okay, so motion to authorize the issuance of a building permit for map 261 lot 59 on Holiday Lakeshore Drive with improvements to meet the road standard and a letter from the homeowner of the large tree that exists and may have to be heavily limbed at the main curve in order to meet the road standard and address the deficiencies identified by the road agent.
Second that.
Roll call.
Nantrick.
Hardikoff, aye.
Campiello, aye.
Gibson, aye.
Sakosha abstained.
We'll look at a policy review.
I'm mostly concerned about this application.
I'm mostly concerned about just this application as well.
Okay, we don't necessarily want to revisit
No,
the policy,
we-
but on a
we-
case-by-case basis.
We-
And the select board has full authority to do that, no question about
Yep,
that.
we opened it up to abutters and we heard them, and I think we need to react to what we heard.
Understood?
Awesome. Okay, next up, under public hearings, issuance of a building permit on Dry Hill Road, a Class 6 road for Nathan Gray and Carrie Gray, map 201, lot 16.
Make sure the microphone's green.
Not. Now it is. Nathan Gray, 345 Dry Hill Road, Barrington. If I may approach, I'm going to pass out some of these packets. I believe some of you already have them. This is just giving some insight into the current road conditions. You already have one.
Yeah, I
Thank you.
don't have it with me, but.
Is any of it new information from the planning board? Yeah, the whole packet that you gave to the planning board is in their printed packet. Yep, thanks for bringing extra copies.
Looks vaguely familiar.
Okay. All right. So, good evening, members of the select board, and thank you for taking the time to meet with me today. I'm here to address ongoing work and necessary steps to bring Dry Hill Road up to Class 6 road standards. First, I want to emphasize that the road improvements I'm undertaking are directly tied to my effort to secure a permit to rehabilitate my home and make it more livable. Unfortunately, I've faced delays in obtaining this permit due to the red list, which has held up progress for over 6 months. While I understand the importance of following guidelines, I hope that today's discussion can help bring more clarity and resolve these issues so I can move forward with the project. In terms of the road's current conditions, I want to assure you that it's very close to meeting the necessary standards. The images provided were taken prior to some road maintenance I've already performed. One of the issues I encountered was the accumulation of a top layer of dead leaves, which had led to the germination of grass and weed-like plants along the side of the road that you might see inside of these pictures. After clearing this layer, it became clear that the road's foundation is solid, with road materials well beneath this superficial layer. So you might be seeing that in some of the pictures, that grass layer. It pulled right up. In fact, driving the stakes into the ground was quite difficult because of the amount of crushed stone and road pack already placed underneath that thin surface layer. This demonstrates that much of the road infrastructure is already in place, requiring only some additional work to fully meet the Class 6 standards. As you know, the role of the Select Board is to serve as the voice of the residents, overseeing matters that impact the community and providing intervention and guidance where needed. I am reaching out to you as elected officials to help clarify and facilitate this process of upgrading Dry Hill Road, ensuring it meets the standards for emergency vehicles access and year-round usability. At the last meeting with the Planning Board, several questions were raised, both from myself and by the Planning Board, about the best way to proceed with these improvements. To bring more clarity, I have prepared the package that is in front of you, which outlines the current conditions of the road, along with the work I'm proposed to ensure compliance. One of the key issues raised during the previous discussion seems to stem from lack of precise measurements. However, as you can see from the detailed survey markers I have set along the road, the majority of the Dry Hill Road is already within the compliance of the required 16-foot traveled surface with 2-foot shoulders on either side, meeting the 20-foot total width requirements. Additionally, the road features 6 pull-off areas spaced no more than 500 feet apart, ensuring emergency vehicles access through the length of the road. I plan to continue bringing the road up to the standard by adding additional crushed stone and road pack where necessary, ensuring proper drainage and crown maintenance, of course. Regarding the pull-offs, while it's not entirely clear on how many must meet the full 40-foot length standard, I'm planning a minimum of 1 centrally located pull-off to accommodate large vehicles and fire trucks strategically placed at the sections with the greatest visibility on oncoming traffic. There'll be multiple pull-offs. One will be over 40 feet long. Furthermore, I've included a plan, which I haven't presented to you, to construct a 50 by 50 foot turnaround at the entrance of 345 Dry Hill Road and the gated entrance to the Rochester Upper Reservoir, as recommended for emergency vehicles. One area that requires further insight from the board is a culvert, which has been brought to our attention by another city official. I would like to provide more details on this matter. The culvert in question is a plastic pipe that allows water to flow through and is already over 25 feet long, the culvert part, while the road above it is just under 20 feet wide. Pulling up the entire culvert would be unnecessary and overly disruptive. Instead, a more practical approach would be to reinforce the base of the culvert with large boulders, providing a solid foundation and gradually increasing the size of the rocks as we move up towards the road surface. This solution would widen the road by the few inches needed to meet the Class 6 standard without requiring a full excavation of the culvert. In conclusion, I am committed to ensuring that Dry Hill Road meets the necessary Class 6 road standards to support the community's needs, and I look forward to your guidance in helping clarify and move forward with these efforts. I appreciate your time and leadership and willingness to assist in the matter. And I'll take some questions, and then maybe we can go through the emails and the other concerns of the other employees.
Any discussion from the board? Any questions for Mr. Gray?
So the road will be 20 feet wide
Correct.
everywhere.
Correct.
And all culverts, I think at one point you had a 19-foot culvert, which didn't meet the standard, so that has changed.
It's not, it doesn't have to do with the actual culvert. The culvert is long enough. It's the road surface above the culvert, which can be widened by doing the larger rocks and
Okay, so you
kind
can
of
bring
stacking
that
them
to
up.
a 20-foot standard.
Bring it to 20 feet, all of it 20 feet.
And the carve-outs, do we have a standard for how?
We don't. So what the policy says is that whether it's additional drainage or turnarounds may be requested by department heads. These are actually turnouts and turnarounds proposed by the applicant. And so the staff comments were that if there's a pull-off or a turnaround, needs to be a sufficient size. The specific recommendation from department heads with the turnaround at the driveway, it was noted that I think there's a long driveway. And so at the end where the road meets the driveway, having room for vehicles to turn around at the end of the road without having to use the private property, that's where that 50-foot recommendation for a turnaround came from. And so, yeah, staff had an opportunity after the planning board so that detailed scope, which was really helpful, was provided at the planning board meeting. So staff didn't have an opportunity to review that before the planning board meeting, but reviewed it since. And we're certainly appreciative of the additional details. The road agent did have some concerns about sections of the scope actually meeting the current policy. One of the benefits of this application being on attachment B, the road work has to be done, signed off by the road agent before the building permit is issued. So I think, we can be more specific. Road agent can be more specific with the applicant of where those areas of concern are. But with the additional details, Mark was able to go out there and say, okay, this isn't, these shoulders aren't sufficiently constructed to hold the weight of a fire truck, which is what's required by the policy. And then, the culvert section, certainly the requirements of the policy are that the road be 20 feet wide, full width of 20 feet wide, built sufficiently to support a fire engine. So if there are culverts that need to be extended to accomplish that, so be it, but the policy is simply that the road surface be wide enough to support a fire engine. And then the paved apron, there's a pothole in the paved apron, protect Pond Hill Road. That was an additional suggestion, a recommendation from staff. And then, the 50 by 50 foot turnaround where the road meets the driveway with no parking signs posted to make sure that that stays clear. And then, the note about the specific area. And if the scope, and this is where sometimes the details are helpful, if the scope of widening the road at an area of a wetland crossing includes extending or especially replacing the culvert, that might be a situation where the select board wants to require a bond for that work to make sure that if something happens during construction, that the town's in a position to be able to either restore the road to its previous condition or finish the project. And so that's a responsibility of the select board with public roads, class 6 roads like this one, but that would be dependent on the scope. If it doesn't include the replacement or extension of a culvert, the road agent doesn't recommend the need for a bond in this situation for widening the road and taking the shoulders out farther, adding material. But if there is excavation in a road like that, that's where we would want to look at requiring a bond.
Yeah, it's a little bit tricky because it's a red listed road, but he already lives there. So to me, it feels a little different than somebody trying to.
That brings up a point, and we can kind of work through the more details again in a second here, but that brings up the point of having to do the work beforehand. I guess I would ask if we could take the current road and be able to issue the permits as soon as possible. That's the idea of all this, is to be able to issue the permit as soon as possible. So is it possible to issue the permit with the current road situation the way it is? And
Are you willing to bond?
for what? What's the 44,000 for? That might have been in a.
That way after.
That might have been the previous estimates before I was looking at improving different portions of the road. If that 44,000, if you're referring to, I can't remember my numbers exactly, if that was my estimates. But this additional road pack and putting some boulders over the culvert and making the pullouts isn't going to do that much. But I am willing to put up cash or bonds or whatever to make this process go a little bit faster. Just been so long, and it doesn't seem like there's
I would say the bond would be just as good as, a letter from a land abutter.
Yeah, so the recommendation of department heads has less to do with the guarantee that the work's going to get done and more to do with improving the access. Obviously, when a building is under construction, there's more risk for, especially fire than when it's just being lived in. And so the recommendation from department heads is, and the reason that it's on attachment B, is that the road improvements be made before the building is constructed, before the building is under construction.
So if I could kind of work through so since that maybe was on the red list, just cutting back the trees alone has made a huge difference. I don't know if has anyone driven down the road? Seems to be a problem. So driving down the road, the trees have been widened, and then fix potholes, added additional surface area. There is already that 50 by 50 foot. If we work from the back, so my driveway, there is already that over 50 feet by 50 feet section at the very end for turnarounds. Some more gravel and stuff could be added there, but it is hardly packed. A lot of the Rochester uses a lot of heavy equipment and such and goes through that gate. So it does support those vehicles. Putting up the no parking signs is going to help out the area as well, because people are constantly parking there and trespassing onto the reservoir. So I know, because I've been talked with Rochester, we're putting in some conservation up there as well. It's under purchase and sale agreement that we're doing up there as well. And so that those no parking signs would be great. Speaking of the no parking signs, by improving the road, by doing the maintenance to the road, cutting back the trees, making more pull-offs, adding additional top layer to the road, it's created an issue with people parking there, and now people are parking on the side of the road instead of going all the way up to the end and then trespassing through the different areas there. So I have been in touch with the police department. I believe they're going to have a recommendation of maybe some more no parking signs there. We'll see what they come up with. Speaking of the no parking signs. And then on the way back to the culvert is under 20 feet. It's like, I didn't do exact measurements, and I wanted to do that just for this reason right here, but it's like 19 feet 6 inches or something. It's pretty close. And then the additional pull-offs are there. There is one over 40 feet. And then coming all the way back, all of it's good surface still to be able to drive on, even if you go off of the road, even on like neighbor increased upon their grass. And then coming all the way up to the skirt, I would ask for some leeway with the skirt. For me to maintain the skirt, like, fine, I'll go there and fill a pothole with a couple bags of asphalt repair. But isn't that the reason for the skirt is to protect the road? And is that typically something that the city maintains, or, I don't know, it's a small pothole, but I would think that would be part of the city's, so it's kind of in question there.
So I see two ways that we could see. We could table this and wait till we have the road re-inspected and another analysis done on the cost to bring it to standard, or we could ask that a bond for the $44,000 take place, issue the building permit, probably a $2,000 cost to you to take out the bond.
I understand.
And then we're ensured that he can move ahead with it, and we can still meet the roads. And I'm more inclined.
Discussion?
If it's a red listed road, but if we bring it to standard, then it's not a red listed road again.
Right. That's the goal,
So-
right?
Yeah. Which is what the whole policy is really about.
Yeah, I'm not trying to get a waiver from
Yeah.
I'm trying to bring it
The
up to standard.
understanding is are already a home.
Correct.
Okay,
And the only homeowner.
okay.
And,
So can you
and
lay
the,
out, here's the road and here's your house. Where is in that distance, where are people parking to go to the Rochester Reservoir?
It's right before our gate. Like, so there's our section, there's the first section of the road that goes
would
by
be
the
about
pond. The
halfway
pond's
down.
on the
Halfway
left-hand
down.
side,
That's what-
and then right on the right after the pond. It's over there.
Do we have a method of, how do we remove something from the red listed list, right? Because
Once it
only-
meets the standard.
Well, but there's the red list and there's the other roads you try to meet the standard with. It seems like getting the building permit in advance is the only thing that's different, right? Red listed.
No. So the different than a road that isn't listed on attachment B, those roads, construction on those roads are eligible for making incremental improvements. Those incremental improvements being up to 10% of the building permit cost. So any road listed or road segment listed on attachment B is required to be brought up to the full road standard, regardless of the cost, regardless if it costs more than 10% of the building permit cost prior to the issuance of a building permit. But obviously, any road that's listed in attachment B, once it's brought up to that standard and presumably maintained at that standard, in 20 years, a road could deteriorate beyond the standard and it could be added again. But once a road is brought up to that standard, it's no longer listed on attachment B, and it would be eligible for Class 6 and private road building permits, just like all the rest.
Chris?
It seems to me that you need to do this road work in a really timely fashion because of the season we're in. So it seems like we could just, I would be comfortable saying, go do the road work, go do it immediately, come back and take it off the red list.
He wouldn't have to come back. So the proposal,
yes.
the proposal for before
Road
you
agent would.
is to authorize the issuance of the building permit, where the road work would be done. Once the road work's done and signed off by the road agent, then the building permit would be issued without having to come back to the select board.
I would be most comfortable with that.
Okay.
And there's an occupancy issue too. You can't give a certificate of occupancy
Because he already lives.
until it's all done.
Well, he already lives there.
Yeah, well, it would be for the renovated space, but the certificate of occupancy is less consequential in this case because the purpose of the policy being road improvements would already be done before the building permit is issued. And again, that is one of the criteria that the policy committee used in identifying what roads or road segments to add to attachment B is where are the circumstances of the road so poor for emergency access that they should be fixed before building permits issued.
If I could add something too, as well as the urgency to get the road done because the winter is moving in upon us. There's urgency to get the building is also upon us because we have decks in these proposals, we have painting of the exterior house, we have windows to change and such too. So I just ask that you consider that and possibly offer that bond so I could do both of them simultaneously. I'd like to improve. I would like to do the road as well as the building, so I could keep up with it, get it before the winter gets in.
Do I hear a motion coming?
I'd like to make a motion to authorize the issuance of building permit for map 201, lot 16 on Dry Hill Road with a bond held for $44,000 to ensure that road improvement standards are brought up to appropriate standards and to address recommendations identified by department heads as presented in the material.
We're going to pause that motion, and since this is a public hearing, we're going to go ahead and open up public comment. Is there anybody in studio or online that would like to comment? Okay, nothing in studio or online, so I'm going to go ahead and close public comment. Do we have a second on Tracy's motion? Roll call.
Mancheck, aye.
Hardikoff, aye.
Capello, I am doing that just because this is the first time we had a red light. I want to make sure we have a solid policy for both.
Tonight. Sakosha abstain.
All right, thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay.
I see a hand that just came up online. We're outside of that public hearing. There's another public comment at the end of the meeting after the end of the meeting. What comes just before the end of the meeting? Select board reports and concerns.
Okay. So under public hearings, we're going to go to letter D as amended. And this is for Finney Way, location map 256, lot 2, owner applicant, Joe Wilson.
Thank you all for letting me in here. I went to the, applying for a building permit, went to the September planning board. They told me I needed to widen another piece of my road. Put me on the October 1st. I widened the road, got it all inspected by the road agent before October 1st, and the planning board approved it and sent me here for October 21st, but
So the road work has already been done, all but the paved apron and any potential need to grade the gravel road after construction activities. Sometimes construction vehicles can muck up the road. And so the scope, the proposal is that the road will meet the full Class 6 private road building standard. The road agent confirmed, I talked to him today, that it does. And the only remaining recommendations are the paved apron where Finney Way meets France Road, and any need to regrade Finney Way after construction activities are complete. So can confirm the work is already done.
Any discussion from the board?
I think
Public comment?
Public
Yep.
comment.
So we're going to go ahead and open up public comment. If there's anybody in studio or online that would like to make a comment, please either raise your hand online or come up to the podium. Okay, with nothing online or in studio, I'm going to go ahead and close public comment.
And the proposal would be to make a motion to authorize the issuance of a building permit for map 256 lot 2 on Finney Way with the improvements to meet the road standards and to address the recommendations identified by department heads as presented.
Second.
So moved.
Oh,
Somebody.
so moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Mancheck, aye.
Hardikoff, aye.
Capello, aye.
Gibson, aye. Scotia abstained.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You still owe me lunch.
He was so worried he didn't eat lunch. We went a little back and forth.
I was
Deal.
in the middle of lunch when I was telling you. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson.
Enjoy. All right, consent agenda.
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Okay, we have a second? Second, roll call.
Mancheck, aye.
Hardikoff, aye.
Capello, aye.
Gibson, aye. Scotia. Okay, under appointments. We discussed this last meeting, was discussion for the Isinglass Local River Advisory. Elizabeth Duran.
Move we appoint Elizabeth Duran as a member of the Isinglass Local River Advisory Committee pursuant to SA 483:8-A, term expiring in March of 2027.
Second it.
Roll call.
Mancheck, aye.
Hardikoff, aye.
Capello, aye.
Gibson, aye. Scotia. Okay, advisory budget committee, Farida Shagasi. This was also one that we had discussion on last meeting.
I move we appoint Farida Shagasi as an alternate member of the Advisory Budget Committee with a term expiring in March 2026.
Okay, roll call.
Mancheck, aye.
Hardikoff, aye.
Capello, aye.
Gibson, aye. Scotia, aye. Okay, this is discussion only unless the board feels like we're good to move with a vote, but library trustee alternate, Diane, I'm gonna, Nataraga?
Madariaga?
Natariaga?
I don't have anything better.
Good job. She's attended all the trustee meetings. They very much would like her to be appointed. She's, like I say, she sat through several of the meetings, has been actively involved, so I certainly recommend her.
Okay.
I would second that. I do think we should stick to our policy though and vote on it next time.
Yep. Okay,
And she understands that incidentally when we discussed that.
all right. Well, if there's no further discussion on that, we're gonna go ahead and close appointments and move our way down to staff reports.
Fantastic. We now are back to having 2 meetings in a month. And so we already talked about work anniversaries last week. I'll move on to 2025 budget. First thing I'll point out to select board members is you'll notice that a portion of your packet was aggregated with paperclip and with hole punch. Those are all documents that belong in your budget binder. So you can take that every select board meeting and add those components to your budget binder. They are linked in the town administrator report as well, so you know what they're called. You can refer to the detailed table of contents, file them appropriately. Typically, the first of those documents will be the advisory budget committee meeting minutes, either singular or plural, from the meeting since the last select board meeting. And if you're interested in staying apprised to the work of the budget committee through the process, that's going to be the best way to do so, reading through those minutes. The advisory budget committee has asked that those minutes include, the additional details that are discussed and the questions and answers. And so you'll see that level of detail every time. I'll point out, because it comes out up later in the meeting, the 2025 cost of living adjustment data is the second document in here. and the rest of the documents are just updated costs for the next year. Now moving on to the budget proposal. So I gave the initial budget proposal to the Advisory Budget Committee on the 15th of October. So that process has begun as promised to get the Select Board at a starting point. I'll make an initial budget proposal to you, and then we'll hear from the Advisory Budget Committee with their recommendations on December 2nd. I will make a plug. The budget binder, the hundreds of pages of the budget binder are all available electronically at barrington.nh.gov/2025 budget. So anybody, you don't have to be on the Budget Committee or the Select Board to review the materials, ask questions, contact myself, department heads, the finance administrator, your elected officials, or Budget Committee members with anything relating to the community's budget for 2025.
And for those not tech savvy, are they welcome to come in and get a copy?
Absolutely. Well, yeah, so we probably won't be making extra budget binders, but we have a spare that they could come in and review at any point. Absolutely. Yep, excellent point. And if there are no questions at this juncture, I will go through these 23 slides efficiently for the Select Board's consideration. So everything we do is driven by the Select Board's mission, vision, and values. I won't read through them here because these are your words. We keep them posted on the wall over there, and it's important to keep in mind that everything that department heads do, what they provide for services, the additional funds we're asking for to provide those services, all are derived from this mission, vision, and values set by the Select Board and reviewed annually. I'm going to review briefly the population and demographic data and changes from last year. So we'll talk about Consumer Price Index more in a minute because we have updated data. The population has continued to rise. We're continuing to see about a 75 resident per year average now over the last 14 years. With a current population of just over 9,600 people. The median household income has remained high at $103,000. Poverty rate has remained low at 5.5%. Homeownership has remained high but lower than last year. Likely a result is some of the rental units that have popped up, like across the street from the middle school. Best example of that. All of this data comes from the census and their ACS 5-year survey. Importantly, when we're looking at developing a budget and presenting that to the community, we need to understand where the money from that budget to fund that budget comes from. And so this is a really valuable pie chart. There's a whole chapter on revenue in the budget binder, but this pie chart shows that about half of what it takes to fund our annual local government comes from property taxes. The other half comes from a variety of sources, including about a quarter from vehicle registrations. The state and federal aid's about 12%, fees for service, things like the transfer station, building permit fees, et cetera, is about 7%, and miscellaneous things like interest on investments and other costs and penalties account for about 6%. So this diversified revenue source is very helpful for the community in not experiencing increases to the budget in just one area. A good example is just today I learned that Barrington's distribution of rooms and meals tax in 2024 is 4.5% higher than 2023. That's about $40,000 worth of additional revenue from state aid, which is really helpful for the community. So we'll continue to monitor revenue. I'll update this chart once we get our tax rate set for 2024. Speaking of tax rate, our tax rate history, which we know this funds about half of our government right now. You can see the rate in 2016 was $4.59, and last year was $2.66. This year, I expect it to be around $3, maybe plus or minus 10 cents. And so I'll keep you posted when we get that information. But the biggest highlight here is the changes in values over those years. It is an incredible piece of data, which isn't unique to Barrington, but at this level, it's unique to Barrington to see that our values, the value of property in our community, has consistently risen. 8% 17, 12% 19, 20% 2021, 30% in 2023. And so obviously that increase in value, close to $2 billion of total assessed value in the town, has driven our tax rate down, and our municipal tax rate to $2.66. Here's a line chart that shows that reduction. I won't dwell on this data point, but I will reiterate for any of those who haven't heard me to talk about it before, Barrington's municipal tax rate is an outlier. Our municipal tax rate is unusually low compared to the 234 towns and cities in the state, to the point where the most appropriate metric puts us at the 6th percentile for our municipal tax rate, with only 12 communities smaller. And so we do a lot with a little. We are a very lean municipal government. We do have some growth in the budget proposal this year, but that growth is necessary to maintain the level of services that we have. Measures of financial stability, a really important point that we want to track closely, and we have continued to track closely. First is a stable municipal tax rate. And I love this bar chart that's inset there. I was prompted to do an analysis earlier this year to look at how our changes in values and our changes in municipal taxes and the growth in our budget has impacted the average homeowner. And so what this data analysis showed is that in 2013, the average home in Barrington was valued at $250,000. And these aren't just fake numbers. There are specific examples of properties in Barrington where the value has changed from 2013 to about $250,000 to 2023 to about $425,000. Anyways, with the tax rate in 2013 and those values, that homeowner paid $1,165 in taxes. 10 years later, their property was valued at $425,000, and at the tax rate in 2023, they paid $1,131. They paid less in real dollars 10 years later to their municipal government. Now, that's because the growth in Barrington's spending has been outpaced by the growth in the tax base and other revenue sources. And what's even more astounding is over that same 10-year period, inflation rose 30%. So in actuality, residents paid by the value of the dollar 30% less to their municipal government in 2023 than they did in 2013. And so all that to say, there are increases built into this budget, but those are necessary, and some of those may have been deferred. Unassigned fund balance, we target 8 to 17%. Right now, we hold 13.5%. We'll talk more about that in the process. This is a history, a table that shows the history of how we've used surplus unassigned fund balance. Surplus unassigned fund balance being that amount of unassigned fund balance above the 12.5% target. Traditionally, we've used it to fund capital reserve contributions. In 2023, we put all warrant articles on the tax rate and just used money at tax rate setting to buy down the tax rate. In 2024, we did a 50-50 split. We funded half of the warrant article cost from unassigned fund balance with the other half on the tax rate. And so there'll be discussion about how we do that this year. Unassigned fund balance history, again, this shows the same data and how we have had surplus unassigned fund balance to fund our capital priorities. Okay, into the operating budget. After that table setting, you'll see that our 2024 approved budget's just over $9 million. You'll see that the proposal for 2025 is just under $10 million, a difference of about $900,000 or 9.94%. An important point to make in the Budget Committee, it was important to the Budget Committee that this information be shared alongside with the overall increase. 3.3% of that 9.9% increase is the bond approved by voters for the new library. So the increase in the actual operating expenses, providing services, et cetera, is about 6.7%. It's important to me that we talk about the total proposed budget increase and not those aggregate parts. But for residents, when they're looking at our proposal, going in to vote, it's important for them to understand all of the details that make up that budget proposal. To that end, I have this pie chart that shows where that $900,000 comes from. 33% comes from the library bond we just talked about. 51% comes from wages and benefit impact factors. We'll talk more about that in a second. That's not surprising. We're a customer service organization. About 75% of our annual budget is wages and benefits. And then 16% is other impacts. For wage and benefit impacts, a few of the highlights, the Select Board already reviewed the proposal to add a new full-time patrol officer starting in July. That's $60,000. There's a few fire department staffing changes that total $36,000. Two that increase the budget, one that decreases the budget. The assistant chief, we have a position of assistant chief, but there's no regular hours. And so proposed in 2025, we'd like to have that assistant chief working regularly to support the work of the fire department and allow the duties and responsibilities of the chief to start to be spread as we look to an eventual retirement of our chief and replacing that department head with a sustainable model. The administrative assistant, we funded that last year's budget starting in July, so this is the second half of that funding to fund it for a year, full year. And you'll see a reduction in on-call budget based on the increased staff coverage and the needs for that funding model. There's a proposal for an assistant planner for conservation, which we'll talk more about at tonight's meeting, but in the budget right now is $11,000 in the operating budget for that position, subject to review by the select board. The transfer station has proposed to add a 5th staff member for Saturdays to accommodate the traffic. That accounts for $8,700. Other staffing changes, including census updates, proposed cost of living adjustment, pay plan step allowance, benefit cost increases. We do have some updated data. You have the backup in your printed materials, but that 50,000 number was reduced by about 17,000 based on some actuals that we've gotten in. And we don't have all of that data yet. Recreation administrative assistant, the additional 25% of the year budget for that, and the additional part-time deputy building inspector, the additional 25% for that. Some of the other impact factors that aren't wages and benefits that are over $10,000, you see the general government buildings contracts went up $35,000. So the biggest part of this is the custodial, contract custodial services. This was a proposal from last year's budget, which we funded from ARPA funds. That was a proposal from the select board. That worked really well. It has been nice to have some of those more cyclical cleanings of the buildings to stay on top of the very nice facilities we have and to backfill for vacancies in the staff custodians that we have. We also have 3 new generators, which is fantastic, but they need to be maintained, and we need to pay to have them maintained. Highway building maintenance, it's a $22,000 increase. The one project plan for next year is refinishing the garage floor. The building's 50 years old, and we're moving a lot of the maintenance activities out back and keeping up with the front garage to have that be a more clean environment so it's easier to maintain moving forward. Paving, there is a proposal in the budget to increase paving by $50,000. This was a proposal that was cut in last year's budget. The level of funding remained the same. Unfortunately, because of cost escalation, we have to spend about $50,000 more every year in paving just to do the same amount of work. And so I would urge the select board, when the budget committee brings you a proposal, to keep that in the budget so we can continue to keep up with our pavement management plan. Gravel road upgrades, unfortunately, we had a really good deal sourcing gravel locally at Brock's, but due to a change kind of in their business plan, their costs have gone up a lot. They don't have unlimited supply of material, and my understanding is they're kind of prioritizing providing material to their concrete plant, and so buying material our costs have increased a lot. We've been trucking a lot of it in, but that's why you're seeing a big increase this year in gravel road upgrades. Waste management contracts, this is offset by revenue, as you know, but there are inflationary cost increase in our waste management contract, which again is a very sweetheart deal that ends at the end of 2026. We have a good plan in place for what happens after that, but we're going to keep with our current contract. Library building, oh please, Joyce.
Question, does the highway department, have they been able to identify anyone else to buy gravel from?
Yes.
Or is this still the lowest cost?
No, this is the lowest cost based on the availability of product. We found prices cheaper than what we could get locally, and we actually had paid to have a lot of material brought in when prices were reasonable, stockpiled at the facility. And so one of the benefits of having a road agent who is 40 years in the private sector is I will go so far as to say that he is excellent at monitoring the materials market. And one of the benefits that he has in the public sector that maybe he didn't have as much in the private sector always is we have a lot of room to store material, and we generally have money to be able to pay in advance to stockpile material. So he does an excellent job managing our stockpiles of material and striking when prices are right. Good question. Absolutely, well deserved. Library building maintenance, we knew in adding a building to our facility portfolio that there would be added costs. It's important to note that these costs are proposed to start in July, so these aren't full year costs. but there's about 10,000 for utilities and electrical costs in the library budget based from the new library. And then we talked about the library bond. It's about $300,000 between principal and interest. There are some budget decreases as well. I proposed to decrease the incident fund based on our need for utilization in recent years. General government buildings vehicle fuel. There's in the budget binder, there's an entire vehicle fuel analysis that shows our historical utilization and price fluctuations. So we're proposing to reduce that vehicle fuel budget based on that analysis. We talked about the on-call staffing budget. Highway uniforms, based on the Highway Department union contract, we changed how we provide uniform service to the staff. They requested a uniform allowance of $750, which we are providing, and we're not providing uniform service to the entire department. So that budget is reduced by about $10,000. And highway winter contractors. So this is maybe one of the most difficult budgets to anticipate, right? And we are consistently budgeting close to actual expenditures, but we are never under budgeting this line. We always have a little bit of buffer. And I challenge Mark to reduce that this year because we have a backup plan. We have a capital reserve with a couple of $100,000 in it for emergency situations where we don't have sufficient budget. And in my 6 years here, we've never used it. And I'm not saying that we should plan on using it, but it's our responsibility to present a tight enough budget to the residents that it's possible that we would use it if we had a bad winter. And so we're not reducing this budget with the chance that residents will be, shorthanded when it comes to their winter maintenance. We have a backup plan, but we're budgeting closer than we have in the past.
The highway winter contracts is higher than it was last year, right? Because we had an increase
Exactly
in the middle of the year, right? Budget.
Yeah, during the budget process. Yep, exactly. Good memory. So this is kind of bringing it back down a little bit. Okay, revenue impact. We talked about how revenue is very important because about 50% of our operating budget expenditures is funded from revenue other than property taxes. The current budget estimate indicates about a 2.5% reduction, or about $113,000 from our final revenue estimate for 2024. Our motor vehicle registration revenue has started increasing again, which is a positive, but our interest on investments is much less. We're not as confident that we'll see the returns that we saw in 2024 in 2025, based on conversations with the Fed and the reductions in interest rates in the future. And so right now we're being conservative in how we're estimating revenue from interest on investments because we don't want to put ourselves in a position where we underestimate or overestimate our revenue and end up short. So this number will continue to be updated throughout the end of this year and early next year.
What interest rate are you using on the?
Excellent question. So our interest on investments is derived from our agreement with TD Bank, and our investments collect at the top end of the Fed range. So we don't have any of our general fund in any sort of aggressive investment. It's 100% liquid, 100% insured, and we forfeit some rate of return in managing that way. It's the direction of the treasurer. That's his responsibility. But we were able to, at his leadership, negotiate with TD to increase that rate of return a few years ago when we had a proposal from another bank to come in and take our accounts. So, yep, that's what we use. Excellent question. Okay, and then there's warrant articles. There's separate warrant articles. There's only a couple additions here, which we'll actually talk about later in tonight's meeting. And we'll talk about capital improvement funding later in tonight's meeting. So we'll really talk about all of these. But I'll go to the next slide and show you that we're looking at about $1.2 million plus or minus for additional capital reserve funding outside of the operating budget, which is similar to last year's level of funding. There's a link to the budget binder. Anybody, again, you don't have to be on the budget committee or select board to ask questions, be interested in the budget, review it. My contact information is there. Please email me, ask me questions, and happy to talk to anybody about the budget. Okay, the table has been set. So we won't talk in detail about the budget until December 2nd. Fantastic. Ready to move on?
Understood.
No update, Ayers Lake Boat Launch, still working on permitting. Barrington Center Development Committee will be involved in Recreation's Fall Fest, which is on October 26th. Not to steal Jim's thunder, but the event is 12 to 4. Encourage you to bring your friends, bring your family. The schools partnered with the town tremendously. Each classroom is decorating a pumpkin, which will be brought out to the Barrington Common Perimeter Trail. And kids will be able to bring their parents and families out to find the pumpkin that their class decorated. So another awesome addition to the Fall festivities.
Big shout out to the rec department on that one.
Huge shout out. No question. Highway Department finished the expansion of the municipal parking area, and the group is working on a survey, which will launch at the election and in the tax bill insert, to kind of take the next quantitative step to what residents are looking for out of that Barrington Common lot. Trail interconnectivity stakeholder meeting. So I have this as a vote item because in your packet is a proposed MOU with UNH Cooperative Extension for the Downtowns and Trails program. In case you don't know, I'm super excited about this opportunity. I'm glad they selected us. Looking for support from the select board to sign this. $3,000 cost from the incident fund.
Do we hear a motion?
Go ahead, Dan.
Oh, I want to make a motion.
Everyone's excited. We're very excited about this.
We agree. Go ahead.
I move that we
Hello, you
accept
go.
the MOU from UNH for the downtown trails of Barrington.
I'll second.
Roll call.
Patrick, aye.
Hardikoff, aye.
Capello, aye.
Gibson, aye.
Sakosha.
Fantastic. Strategic planning and goals progress, future action steps, new updates in bold as usual. The only, probably call it a couple actually. I'm glad to report that we have advertised the request for proposals for commercial industrial land development. Those proposals are due on November 19th. Is it 19th or 18th?
What you said.
I know.
18th is Sunday, isn't it?
18th Sunday, so 19th Monday? Yeah. I trust the Connor that wrote this down, but they're due in November, middle of November. So I'm excited about the opportunities that will present, and more to come on that. If you know anybody that is looking for commercial industrial land, send them my way.
18 is Monday, 19 is Tuesday.
Yeah, we'll say the 18th. Amended town administrator report. Dannon, did you have something?
No, I was just going to say, have you heard anything? Has anyone
I have heard from
comments?
Yes, I have. Yep, I have heard interest. And actually, just today, I was, going back through some old to-do lists and trying to think about how else we could promote it. We put it out all the usual suspects. But I signed up for a Zillow account and posted the commercial land on there. So I feel like maybe that'll capture an audience that we wouldn't capture otherwise. So, and it's free. So
Nice heads up right on that, yeah.
all right, so we'll see. Library MOU is the only other one I wanted to point out. So we knew that now would be the right time to update the memorandum of understanding between the town, select board, and the library. And there are a few items that we have that have evolved over the years that it is important to memorialize. And there are some things that we kind of need to rip the Band-Aid off or, really dig into the specifics. And we have a good group to do it, both on the library trustees and on the select board. Not surprisingly, because of those points, we haven't gotten to a final draft that everybody's happy with. Everybody mostly being the library trustees and myself. So we have gone back and forth a couple of times. There's a few points that both sides feel like the other side should give a little bit more on. And so we're making progress. It's good. But I think it would be valuable for the select board to identify a member or two that can sit down with me off cycle with select board meetings and review one of the later drafts so that we can expand, instead of just being my perspective of what the town should advocate for, the select board would want, looping in some select board perspective in that kind of before we bring it to the full board. Any takers?
Building.
Yep, I'm out.
I certainly can be.
So I'll connect with you on that. I'm meeting with the library trustee chair maybe tomorrow to go over a couple of points. Hopefully we can get to an updated draft, and then you and I can sit down hopefully and talk about that. So stay tuned. I won't read through the rest of the updates, but there's lots in there. We continue to make good progress all across our goal areas.
Are we sending our November availability? Person Scotia?
Yes.
Okay.
We will have a table,
Yep. I
Yep.
can do 8 to 11 again.
Here, I'll take the early shift too.
and we have a meeting the night before. Keep that in mind. Mhm. I don't know who scheduled that. Yeah, listen.
Stacked with volunteers.
Yeah.
I'll have to get back to you. I don't have my calendar with me.
But yes, we'll have a similar table set up as we did at the last election, with a couple of boards from the topics that are going on, and just to be there, engage with the residents. So it's been very, very effective.
Excellent.
Great, cool. Training opportunities, a lot of you going to the conference, which is terrific. Legislative changes, right to know law comes up later in November, and municipal land use law conference. So certainly for our zoning board chair and planning board ex officio member, I would encourage you to look at that as an opportunity. But really anybody that has interest in land use, other select board members, even if you're not on the planning board or zoning board, it's very helpful to have an understanding of where land use law is in New Hampshire. November 16th. Day of the week, I don't know. Sorry.
Friday.
The 15th is Friday. Is that when you think?
I think it's, I hesitate to say this, I think it's the date that I wrote down, but I will confirm. It wouldn't surprise me if it was on a Saturday. A lot of the attendees are citizen volunteers.
And can you attend it remote?
I don't remember there being a virtual option. If you click on that link in my town administrator report, that will take you to the registration page. You might have those details. Okay. All right, moving on from that is back to Jim.
Okay, MOA call.
First, today it was brought to my attention that there was an error in the minutes from September 11, 2023 that we need to talk about today to get somewhere on the record. So item F on the consent agenda should have been a motion to authorize the road agent to pursue a waste oil furnace purchase for the highway garage. That piece.
Wait, what did it say?
It was a copy pasta of the one afterwards.
Okay, so it was right on the agenda, or it was right on the
Correct,
town
and
administrator
that's how we
report,
covered it for today.
but not the minutes.
Yes,
Did we
but
all
water.
vote on it?
2023.
Yes,
And
it's
we're
all
in agreement?
way past. Yep.
It was just reflected inaccurately in the minutes.
So you need a motion.
We can't amend them. So
You need a motion to add an addendum.
Her saying that is that.
yeah, that's
Okay.
that's
Yeah,
all it
yeah,
takes.
yeah. It's in
Yes,
the
that
record.
just covers it.
We're grabbing.
Yep.
Groovy. Okay.
There will be an oath of office at some point coming through for the deputy town clerk. It's not a new person. She's changing her name. So don't worry about that. There will be a couple of Class 6 private road agreements based on things we just approved, 2 oaths of office, and 1 nominee form for Elizabeth Doran.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, moving our way down to old business, the sale of map 248, lot 3. Simply a discussion. This was a piece of land that was landlocked, that was near the town forest. And long and the short, there was an abutter that was interested in purchasing it. And any further discussion from the board? It's been in play, out of play, and back in play.
We were under agreement. We selected through a sealed bid process the Cindy Lee and her family to buy the property back in 2021 at a price of $49,500. That sale fell through. We were going to use that money to buy map 248 lot 3. They asked for a price reduction based on the need to resolve title deficiencies, it being a tax deeded lot, not uncommon. But the select board wasn't willing to reduce the purchase price because we needed that money to buy the other lot. So that sale fell through at the time. Since the Lee family actually bought map 248 lot 3 for about $50,000 and remains interested in buying 248 lot 1. And so I talked to the Lands Committee chair and the Conservation Commission chair. They agreed that the town really doesn't have use for the lot anymore, and acknowledged that selling it was probably the best approach. But the idea came forward that we could, in selling the lot to the Lee family, request a right of first refusal to buy not only that lot back, but also the lot that abuts the town forest, if that property were ever to be transferred in the future. And so I talked to the Lee family about it. They're more than willing to secure the right of first refusal, and through some negotiation based on the sale price that they paid for map 248 lot 3 and our prior agreement, the proposal to sell the land is $50,000. So $500 more than a couple of years ago, but based on kind of the market value of an abutting property. So we don't need to do anything else to sell this. I brought this forward just for discussion because I didn't know if you had questions or comments, but you could certainly vote tonight to authorize the transaction. We've already gone through the 4114A process. Everybody was previously in agreement to selling it. The terms have changed a little bit, but to some extent better for the town because we're securing that right of first refusal.
They keep those lots as separate lots.
Yes.
They wouldn't merge.
So that was part of the problem back in 2021. Is we had originally asked that the lots be merged, and a lawyer that they hired, title lawyer, advised them that they wouldn't want to cloud the title of their house lot with a tax deeded lot. And so the select board actually authorized that they could keep the lot separate, but then they still wanted to resolve the title deficiencies. That would have cost about $5,000 to ask for a reduction. So yes, I expect that they will keep them separate for the same reasons. And map 248 lot 3 doesn't touch. There's one lot in between. No, not yet. I suspect that they might in the future. It makes sense because it would connect their lots. And I've asked that that we include language that if they acquire that lot in the future, that would be included in the lot that the town would have right of first refusal for.
Excellent.
You know if they're conservation minded in their approach with all of this?
This is the interesting thing. All along, our interests have been the same. They abut the property and they don't want to see anything happen to it. The town has looked at expanding the town forest and wants to see that nothing happens to it. They haven't been interested in securing the property with a conservation easement. That may change in the future, but that hasn't been a priority of theirs. I think for them, it seems like owning it is good enough. As long as they own it, they can make sure nothing happens to it. But that's where I think the right of first refusal really comes in for the town in being able to at least have an opportunity, if it were to sell at some point in the future, to step in and pay market value.
Any discussion from the board? How are we feeling? Are you guys ready to vote on this?
I think it seems like a fine proposal.
I see a big budget coming, so I'd like to see some funds coming in where we could get them.
I move that we authorize selling map 248 lot number 3.
Lot number 1. Oh, sorry, 3. I should. Let me just shut up.
It's okay. It's okay. We're close. We're close. For $50,000, and right of refusal, first right of refusal for lots 1, 2, and 3.
Second. Roll call.
Mancheck, aye.
Hardikoff, aye.
Capiello, aye.
Gibson, aye.
Sakoshai. Okay, on to old business B, 2025 budget step allowance and cost of living adjustment. Discussion only. Obvious stuff was in our packet, but it's supporting a 3% cost of living adjustment, which has about a $92,000 impact on the 2025 budget proposal.
So on the screen is the methodology. You have it in your budget binder, but it basically takes 4 data sources. Consumer price index, zooming in closer and closer to Barrington is 3 of them, and then the Social Security cost of living. I'll scan over now to what that data actually is. You see the 3 consumer price index data points with the link to see the raw data. 3.43%, 3.3%, and 3.05%. For those three, the Social Security cost of living adjustment for 2025 is 2.5%. So in aggregate, the Consumer Price Index and Social Security cost of living average is 3.07%. The budget already includes a proposal for a 3% cost of living, which I'm not recommending that we change. I will also just pull up on the screen, you have this in your budget binder, but I updated the data for the historical wage and full-time equivalent data. So I'll scroll down to 2024. So you'll see the FTEs, the partial FTEs that we added, bringing us from 58.95 to 60.55, and what the wage increases were for 2024. And then you can see from this, the trend over the years. We're up from 53.38 FTEs in 2018, and the budget is up from a total of $4 million in 2018 to 5.7 for wages and benefits. This is an item that the Select Board asked that the Select Board decide, not defer to the Advisory Budget Committee. Certainly doesn't have to be decided on any schedule. The Advisory Budget Committee always appreciates the determination being made earlier in the budget process so they know what numbers they have to build around.
Discussion. Shannon.
If we increase that 3% to 3.1% or 0.07, take your number, how much does that add to the 90?
I can tell you momentarily.
But you probably could.
Yep. There are other questions while I do that calculation?
Last year we got October figures, yeah?
Yeah, so how I have done it, what it's described in the methodology is that we go back as far as the last time we updated the pay plan, which the last pay plan was updated in September, so we start this year with October numbers. And I talked to Chair Sakosha about this, if we went a year where we didn't adjust a cost of living adjustment in the pay plan, then we would look back at the data from the last time we updated it, which in this case would be September of 2024. So if we skipped a year, we might look at a 24-month growth because we haven't changed it in between.
Here's our report out on
The very first column.
it was 0%?
Well, that's the starting point. So it's a cumulative. The Consumer Price Index is a cumulative data point, so you're comparing two dates. So October, it was 0 in October because that's when we set the pay plan. That's when a dollar was worth a dollar because we updated it from the prior year. So it resets the clock. And then you can see how it's grown each month, but the last column is the full year, which for our purposes, the annual growth is most important. But generally, like if you hear a monthly, like every month, they may say the Consumer Price Index was 3.5%. They're generally reporting that data as a 3.5% from 12 months ago.
Yes, 2% stood out to me.
Yeah, that may be the national data, and that's where the various data sources are helpful. I wouldn't rely on any one individual. But yeah, so the 12-month from October to September, right, is those 12 months. That's the data that you're seeing.
Important factor, I mean, just to put it out there, is, retaining, right?
Absolutely.
So if the cost of living's gone up 3%, somebody here could maybe follow suit in another town where they're offering that 3%.
What's our step increase percentage?
2.5, and in the police union, it's 3.5.
5.5.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, and that data is included in the town administrator report, the value of that. The 0.1% from 3 to 3.1% adds $3,973 to wages and $994 to benefits. So about $5,000.
Any other questions, comments for discussion purposes that we want Connor to bring
If
back
we
to
turn
us?
over an employee, we waste $7,000 to $8,000 just in the first,
Training.
90 days of getting people up to speed with functionality. So I'm all for supporting the three.
I was gonna say 3.1, just,
I think it makes it harder when you calculate their amounts.
that's why he's real smart.
I understand.
I'm not real smart, but he is, and he has a computer.
The spreadsheet.
I
3.0 is a common cost.
yeah, I think 3.0 is an appropriate.
I'm just saying that employees look and say, why is it less than it should be?
So I'm hearing general support from the board, and we'll look for it on a.
So I'll present it for a vote in November, but there's no additional data that anybody needs to see between now and then. Fantastic.
Unless all of a sudden you tell us that October fell apart, but again, I don't think it did.
Probably gonna come down.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, on to C and O business, assistant planner for conservation. At the September 9th meeting, the select board had a proposal for an additional staff member in the land use office with responsibilities to support the Conservation Commission. At the time, the select board reviewed the draft of the job description and grade placement. Funding. The select board is asked to consider the proposal and inclusion of the new position in the 2025 budget. Any questions, comments? Tracy?
I'd like to see one of the essential position functions for food within 20 months be certified in ArcGIS.
Oh, okay. I think it's a terrific suggestion.
Good idea. Good idea. I don't agree with you, Tracy.
Yeah, but that's not true. I don't.
So I'll add GIS in the examples of duties and responsibilities, and then for knowledge, skills, and abilities, I'll list GIS experience or ability to acquire within the first 2 months of hire. 24 months. 24 months. Yes.
Yeah, it means you become very acclimated with it.
Okay, well, we're looking for a vote on this, so how does the board feel?
I just real quick, Jim, I know it's in your packet, but it's important to state publicly. I met with the Conservation Commission. They had a lot of input on the job description, which was terrific. But more importantly, we talked about the funding plan, which is included in your packet. The Conservation Fund is flush with cash right now. That's a good thing. They have the ability to take good care of their properties and work in a professional manner. They won't have money forever. And so we collectively recognize that staff support would be helpful for the Conservation Commission. And so what I did is I put together a proposal that front ends the funding of this position from the Conservation Fund to the extent for the first 2 years, really 1.5, because we're talking about a July start. The position is funded 80% from the Conservation Fund and 20% from the operating budget. And then each year after that, the burden would shift 20% to where by 2030, 100% of the position would be funded from the operating budget. So the Conservation Commission voted at their last meeting to support this funding plan, which would mean that they would encumber that much money up to almost $300,000 of their conservation fund to fund this funding proposal.
So hopefully this person with grant writing and managing
Exactly.
of town
That's one of the
forest would
duties.
actually bring in money to at least offset the cost, hopefully more.
That's the hope, but we don't want to count on that. But we talked about that at the Conservation Commission meeting. Tracy has something.
Basically.
So, I don't know as a select board if we have the right to make an agreement future. Do we?
We don't, and we talked about that at the Conservation Commission also. So
Thank you.
this is,
I'm like
yeah.
kind of
So
perplexed.
this is
Okay.
no different than how the select board establishes policies, like the Class 6 and private road building policy. A future select board member can make any kind of different decision that they want, period. Good government says that we have some kind of regularity and we're not just making a bunch of granular one-year decisions. So we do things like this so that a future select board, hopefully I'll be sitting here and I'll be able to say, this is a commitment that the select board made back in 2024. You don't have to live up to it, but it was a good plan, it was a good idea at the time, and if you're going to deviate from this plan, just make sure you have good reason, you explain those reasons. but it was talked about transparently with the Conservation Commission that a future select board could say, no, we want this position funded 80% again, or we want this position funded 100%. Obviously, at that point, we're negotiating with somebody's job, so the stakes are a little bit higher than they are now. But yes, a future Conservation Commission or select board could deviate from this proposal.
And the other thing I would say in reference to the position description is that the supervision will report to the annual chair of conservation.
I would prefer, if that's a preference of the select board, I would prefer to add language that makes that a reporting structure still go through the town planner, but maybe that the town planner meets with the Conservation Commission chair annually during performance evaluation.
It could be quarterly.
It could be.
I mean, because it's a new position,
Mm-hmm.
in order for you to utilize it most effectively, if the town planner meets with the head of the conservation quarterly, okay, we have a strategic plan over the next 5 years, and we're using it as a live, document that fuels our future work.
Mm-hmm.
With a new position like this, I think that that's the most appropriate way to ensure
Mm-hmm.
that you didn't just hire an FTE who's not accomplishing what conservation intended.
Absolutely, I completely agree. I have hesitancy in having appointed volunteers supervise employees.
Okay, so I would just say,
building that into a quarterly reporting structure, 100% supportive of that.
And liaison to various committees, like the trails, interconnectivity, and all those.
Absolutely.
And, when I see zoning and planning in here, they're only going to be involved when it involves conservation, correct?
Not necessarily. I think part of the intent in having additional staff in the land use office is when when there's a month with a lot of applications and preparing the application materials and having duties assigned by the town planner in whether it's contacting developers for additional information or chasing down, researching additional backup documentation for the planning board or zoning board, that would certainly fall within the scope of the proposed job. The idea is there isn't enough full-time work to just support the conservation efforts in the town of Barrington today. And there is the need for it. In some weeks, it might be 40 hours. But also in some weeks, the needs of the land use office extend beyond what we currently have staffing for. So that's where the joint position becomes most helpful. So the idea isn't that they would only support zoning and planning and other activities of the office during conservation activities. But I actually really appreciate your point about GIS because that's a great example. Once that position is up to speed on GIS, they could be providing GIS support for any of the activities of the office, not just conservation.
Like monitoring the easements and stuff.
Precisely.
So
Yep.
in your position description, do you choose to list, and I certainly would if I was drafting it, that this particular FTE will provide cross-learning for and list any of those positions?
As a duties and responsibilities, cross-trained serves as backup, something like that.
I think that's appropriate.
I'll draft a central position function with cross-training in those other duties and responsibilities.
I think that would accomplish two things. The person that is hired will be able to hit the ground running in land use in a more efficient manner, but also because it's such a small department, when we have one FTE missing, 2 FTEs missing, we are really without.
And it makes it clear what the expectation of that backup is. Nope, excellent point. Is there any objection to those 2 adjustments to the job description?
Sounds good.
Okay.
So,
Board prepared to vote?
yeah, we ready to rock and roll with the motion?
motion to approve an additional FTE to be added to the 2025 budget for an assistant planner for conservation, with an approval this year for the funding proposal and with the funding proposal as a guide for future years, should future select boards choose to accept it.
Second. Roll call.
Hardikoff, aye.
Capello.
Gibson, aye.
Koschak. Oh, all right. Making our way down to new business, and I don't know if I can do this right now, but could we swap A with D? So we don't keep our chief here too long.
A with what?
To move D up to the top.
Delta
Ambulance 2 maintenance and replacement update.
Okay. All right.
You ready, Rick?
Thank you.
Yeah, you're green, right?
So, ambulance, I sent ambulance 2 out to MD Motors in September, along with all the other vehicles for state inspections. And they, there's some mechanical repair that needs to happen to that ambulance to the tune of about $2,100. And so my initial reaction was I wasn't sure that I wanted to spend $2,100 on that ambulance. And so I started, I'd kind of slipped the ball. I had come to you folks last year about putting an RFP together to replace that ambulance with a new one, which you folks approved. And I didn't do it because I 100% forgot about it. In the meantime, I called P&L Customs, which sold us the last 3 or 4 ambulances, and got a little bit of a sticker shock in the fact that he advised me that right now they're telling people when they sell an ambulance that it's 36 months out, and that whatever price they quote for an ambulance, because I said, well, how do you quote an ambulance 36 months out and be without having a price? And he says, we take what we believe the price is going to be and we add a 15% contingency to it. And he says, I'll fire you off a quote. And so about an hour later, I got an email and the quote was $400,000 for an ambulance.
So it would have cost us 2 years ago?
Probably 3 years ago, yeah. So obviously I said to him, wait a minute. If I got to wait 3 years to get an ambulance, then maybe I should consider investing the money in repairing the older ambulance as a backup ambulance. And I still haven't necessarily 100% ruled that out. And then I get emails on a pretty regular basis from a company down in Tennessee where they construct reman ambulances. So they take old boxes off from the ambulances that are going out of service and they clean them up, clean up rust and stuff like that, and then replace, I'll call it an inverter, but so that these boxes have an inverter on them so that it transfers the power from the ambulance to the back of the truck to convert it to operating on home power. And so they put a new one of those in, they replace they put new air conditioners in and, update the things. And so what piqued my interest a little bit is I got this email last week and I'm like, wow, they're showing a 4-wheel drive ambulance for about $258,000 or $260,000, and I'm like, it's going to cost me $400,000 for a 2-wheel drive ambulance. Well, in talking to the lady, they make two that, our ambulances are type A boxes, they're not the van style, they're the square boxes. They make two different styles. They make a small box and they make a bigger one. We've traditionally always bought the bigger one because there's a lot more room in the back to work. The smaller ones give you more room than a van style does, but they're still not as much room to work. And so in talking to the lady, she goes, well, do you want the big box or the little one? I said, no, I want the big one. And she goes, well, that quote that you're looking at, which we already have a sales and purchase on it, she goes, that's the reason. She goes, it's a smaller box. So in talking to her, they do about a 4-month turnaround from the time that they take a new cabin chassis and they take this box and go from here to here, and here you go, you're ready for it. It's about 120 days, and it's ready to go. So in talking to her, one of them I was looking at was the same rear body as what we've been using for the PL Custom. So I said, well, what year is that box? And she goes, it's a 2009. I said, how ironic is that? I have my second ambulance is a 2009. And so she goes, well, if you buy one of these off us, we might be interested in buying yours. So it kind of puts me in the dilemma right now. What kind of I got hit with was with the 5K, the benefit 5K that the kids do on Thanksgiving Day. They've approached me. I've been approached by 3 different people. They need an ambulance. And I said, well, if to run this race, if you are absolutely required to have a dedicated ambulance at that race, I can't guarantee that right now because I cannot take our town ambulance out of service to have it at that race. So if a requirement of the race sanction is that you have to have one, at this point you need to consider looking at potentially renting an ambulance or outsourcing it to a private ambulance company. So now it kind of begs the question, if we can kick this can down, I still believe, I struggle myself to think that it's a good idea to spend $400,000 on a new ambulance. I really do. That's just, it's a lot of money. I'm more inclined, as long as I'm here as chief, to say that it makes sense to take a look at a refurb ambulance and going that way, new cabin chassis with the rear with a refurb body on the back of it, and away you go for about half the money. So, but as I sat here tonight, and I actually talked to Connor about it last week, and I started looking at the idea of the problem is if I spend $2,200 on our old ambulance to bring it so that we can get a sticker that's good for another year. If we chose to go the route of a reman ambulance, and if the town wanted to sell the old ambulance to them, about what we invest in it is probably pretty close to what they're going to offer us for the thing. So it kind of begs the question is, I can find money within my budget. I can spend the $2,100. I can fix the ambulance. I can keep that ambulance for another year, assuming that nothing big is going to go bad on it. And we kick the can down the road to this time next year. Because by next it'll need, at the very least, it'll need rust repair next year. And I absolutely will stand here right now and say that it makes 0 sense to spend money on rust repair because you chase it. And you know, when you take a 2009 ambulance, we have a pretty significant investment in it when it was our only ambulance and we had motor problems with it. And I think, Tracy, I think you were probably on the board when I was coming back to you folks and going, hey, I just spent another $4,000 on it. And so,
So Chief, so what I'm understanding is the potential exists for us to sell back a 15-year-old ambulance and for us to purchase a brand new one.
yes.
And we're at our peak time in when we're gonna get the return on investment in the 15, potentially at our peak.
Yes.
Because I was confused. I thought we were going down the road of selling our ambulance for the refurb, and that cost was close.
So what another option would be, and I apologize, today we were crazy busy at work today, and it's not an excuse, but we had 7 ambulance calls from 6 o'clock this morning.
That's why we need new
3
ambulance.
o'clock this afternoon.
More staff.
And so in talking to the lady, the sales lady, she said, look, she goes, take some pictures of your ambulance. And I haven't necessarily, you know, one of the things I wanted to do is get a look up underneath it. I was going to bring it to a shop and put it on the lift so that we can look underneath it and see what it is, see what there is for corrosion underneath it. But, you know, her indication to me was, and I don't have a price for that because I just didn't chase it that far, is that in theory we could send that ambulance down to Tennessee. They would take the body off it and put it on a new cabin chassis, and in about 4 months, here's your ambulance. I don't know because I didn't head down that path with her. But just, no, go ahead.
Just discussion tonight.
Yeah.
So just to,
So it occurs to, I mean, how do I? The world is often getting bigger, and that means both your firefighters maybe are a little more robust, and the patients that you're trying to save the lives of are a little bit more robust. So
yeah, no, I think
having
that's
a
fair.
larger box
Yep.
is appropriate, and you being able to push life-saving meds in an environment where you can push those life-saving meds is well worth the $2,225 a month, which the ambulance basically costs over the 15 years of its life.
I would say it's also, if we go the newer route, it could also have impacts on maybe future candidates for higher positions, being like, well, I don't want to go in that old crap 09 because I've worked in one before, and you know, I know there are people like that judging on.
Certainly one of the issues is just so you kind of have a little, so she sent me a quote. So if to basically upgrade our old ambulance to a 2024 Ford chassis is the base price of the ambulance is $185,500. And we would, because it isn't a 4-wheel drive, we would certainly look at including what they call on-spot chains there. So you flip a switch and it brings a set of chains out to touch the insides of the tires. So as the tire is spinning, it takes these chains and it spins them under the wheels to act like a set of tire chains. And then when you get where you don't need them, you just shut the switch off. They go back out of the way. That's $48.85. And then, you know, we talked about, you know, do you have the ability to deliver that, or would that be something we have to come out and pick it up? And she said, no. She said, I'll include a delivery price. So to come from Tennessee, they would drive it up here to Tennessee, and if we were trading our old ambulance, they'd throw a feet on it and drive the old one back. If we weren't getting rid of the old ambulance, be looking at, they'd go to an airport, fly home. That's around $3,000. So that quote she gave me came back at $193,885. And then she gave me basically a four-wheel drive Dodge, diesel, with, that came back. It wouldn't obviously need the onslaught change because it's a four-wheel drive. That one came back at 273 in delivery. So
You're struggling with whether to do the fix and continue to patch this or start your quest out of cycle for the premium.
So we're not really out of cycle.
Yeah, it's 2026,
If I would have done,
2025 is when you
if I,
plan it.
last year, if I would have put the RFP together, it would have kicked the can a little further down the road, because instead of it being a year to get the ambulance, once we approved the bid, still have been a couple of years on that. So we'd have, in reality, been a couple of years behind. 2024 was when, in our capital improvement plan, was to replace that old ambulance with a new one, take our current newest one and move that into second due.
The good news, Chief, is you now have administrative support. Write that out.
I do, as of 7:30 this morning.
I think the 2100 to keep the current one alive for another year, they say that's yeah, not a question. And I mean, we need it.
I don't, to be honest, to be perfectly honest with you, please don't take it the wrong way. If I made the decision as the chief to invest $2,100 in that to repair it, I don't need the 5 years permission.
Correct, it's in your budget.
But I really, from a dollars and cents standpoint, I was like, that's too much money to spend on this. But now I sit here and go, I spend the $2,100 and we kick this can down the road, give me a year. I still think it makes the most sense for me to come back to you with a plan to purchase a refurb. You'll see what other companies are out there that do refurbs. I 100% believe that the town won't go bad by purchasing a refurb, and it's easier for me as a fire chief, and certainly you folks as a board, to turn around and say, look, bought a refurbed ambulance for about half the money we would pay for brand.
You get a sense what other towns are doing in this scenario and like what companies they've found.
So I asked this company if she would send me references. She said, yep, there's a ambulance company. They're up in Maine. They got to be a private ambulance because we sell them 12. She says, so she did send me references, so I will reach out to these places.
I think one of the more important questions, what is your life expectancy? You're not going to get 15 years out of it. The fact that it costs half, but only will last half life expectancy, then...
No, I think you would get to 15, and the reason I say that is that if the rear body on, I mean, we have, when Barrington first bought, before I was responsible for this, but the ambulance squad came back and said, the ambulance squad come back and says, buy us this style ambulance because they sold it to the taxpayers, and they weren't selling him a bad bill of goods, but they were saying is that we buy this ambulance, we can take the rear box off, and we can put it on a new cabin chassis. And that kind of made sense, especially back then when they were probably doing 200 or 300 ambulance calls a year, so you could get away with it. But in reality, when they, at the time, new ambulances were cheap enough that it probably didn't make financial sense to do this. The problem with me, I'd be more inclined to do a little more research. I think more, and I certainly agree with Jim, the more I think about it, I think it makes sense for me to spend the $2,100, fix the old ambulance, and start working on a plan that do one of two things: either finding a company that will do a refurb for us and say, all right, it needs to be in our factory on July 1st. On July 2nd, we'll start working on it, and you'll get it back October 1st. Or we start working down the path of we'll buy a refurb, and they'll bring the refurb up to us, and they'll take our old one and drive it away.
Excellent.
Yeah, we need 2 ambulances, right? And you can't get a new one immediately. So it doesn't seem like we have much choice if we're going to keep this one going. Have to spend $2,100 to get
The
a sticker
problem,
on it, then we have to do that.
the problem is we struggle staffing wise. 3 or 4 years ago, we had extra call members and stuff. So there were times when you could turn around and say, hey, the original ambulance is out, and a couple of us, we did it. We jumped in the second ambulance, go on that second call. I don't have that staffing right now, but the more important problem is, like, our primary ambulance is going to need rear tires. It's going to need some brake work. And the thing is bless you, not having that second ambulance to drive right now, when that ambulance goes out of service, I got one of 2 choices. Bless you again. I got 2 choices. I either got to try to borrow an ambulance for a day or 2, or I got to turn around and say, look, we're not going to be able to provide service to the taxpayers. So
I got one at my house. You can use it.
In reference to the understanding when the select board was as services could be provided.
Yep.
So if you can't provide an ambulance and they have to pay McGregor to stand by for the few hours.
all right, so I'll head down that path. I think I'm gonna talk to M&D. I'm gonna work on getting the repairs taken care of. I actually did talk to him and say, look, there's a power steering line that's starting to get bad. There's a master cylinder that's starting to leak a little bit, and he's a whole joint. Again, I don't think the wall joint's so loose that we're gonna have a problem with it tomorrow, but I get the fact that they want to fix it. So I said, well, I talked to the guy. So what if I did this and this, and we passed on the power steering line, I could save a little bit of money. And he says, well, yeah, except for the fact that that's a diesel and doesn't create vacuum, so it gets its brake power off the power steering. So if that line goes bad, not only do you not steer, but the brakes are going to be a problem.
Not
too.
a good situation.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
all right. I think you helped me out. I think I'll in the direction of working on that, getting the other ambulance squared away.
Where are we with the capital reserve for all this and long term, other things you need to replace and stuff like that?
So where we're at in the capital reserve, I couldn't tell you. I don't know if Con has a rough idea how much of money.
I can tell you, but more importantly, where are we with the ambulance revolving fund?
Mm-hmm.
Because the funding to support the replacement of the ambulance is earmarked in the ambulance revolving fund. And we have sufficient funding in the ambulance revolving fund to replace ambulance 2 with a $400,000 ambulance if we wanted to, and cover the anticipated staffing needs of the department in 2025, in part based on the decision by voters in 2024 to put 100% of ambulance revenues into the ambulance revolving fund. So that expanded revenue gives us more options. The capital reserve fund is also has funding available, with counting on continued contributions to fund the other equipment replacement, the engines, the forestry truck, etc.
So and just as a follow-up, then we get out of here, because then we got a bunch of other stuff to do. We're hopeful that we'll see our forestry truck, by mid-November. And we're about 3/4 of the way through putting an RFP together to have engine 1 get a price on getting that refurbed. If we believe that You know, typically most fire trucks today, you use them so little they don't get any miles on them that, you know, we probably, I'm spitballing, but maybe $150,000 we can send that truck out to be refurbed and have a truck that's good for another 10 years. And so, you know, right now, if today's dollars, if I asked you to give me money to support purchasing a new frontline engine, it's with not a lot of extras on it. So we're looking at potentially kicking the can down the road. Engine 2, which is our newest engine, that's going to need framework within the next 3 or 4 years. And the truth of the matter is, we're trying to figure out now whether it makes sense to have it sent out and have new frame rails put on it, or if it makes sense just to replace the thing. But by refurbing engine 1, that certainly provides the town with some options as opposed to buy a new engine 1. And you definitely wouldn't have enough money put together in 5 years to replace engine 2. So,
Thank you, Chief.
thank you.
Okay, new business, we're gonna go right back to the top.
It's gonna be a while till we take a bio break.
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion for recess?
Yep, 3 minutes, I'll be right back.
We're live.
Welcome back. We had a little recess. It's been a long meeting, so bear with us. We're going to go back to new business. We started at the bottom, but now we're going to go back up to A, and that is the CIP, the Capital Improvement Program and Funding discussion.
So, you have your materials. I'm sure that you've reviewed them. The select board has a tremendous amount of responsibility in reviewing the capital improvement program, and more importantly, in supporting funding to accomplish it. This select board, it is important to state, has done an excellent job in recent years of looking to the future of Barrington and how to accomplish what residents want and the goals set by the select board. This capital improvement program is a reflection on what staff does to propose the provision of service and what's necessary to accomplish what the select board establishes that they want in their 1, 3, and 5-year goals and additional strategic planning sessions. So this is the full circle of how the select board sets policy and staff works to propose how we get there. And so this is a draft document that was presented to the planning board for review. The planning board had some comments, was mostly concerned with how things were going to be funded and how projects were going to be lined up. So last year, for the first year, the select board reviewed and adopted a funding plan, which established funding for most of the project on the CIP. What I've done is I've taken the details of the CIP, proposed a few alterations to the details of the CIP for the select board to consider, and then also proposed an updated funding plan building on the work from last year. And so without going through every detail of the CIP, let me just hit the bullet points of what I'm proposing to change. First, Toll End Road. All of Toll End Road needs to be reconstructed from 125 down to the Dover line. The road agent in this year's CIP presented that all as one project, which it does all need to get done. It is implausible that the town would do a $6 million project on one road in town at a time. And so really what we need to do is that project needs to be broken up, and we're not doing it all at once. And so the culvert replacement is step one. And so I'm suggesting that the select board recommend a reduction of that $6 million project, reconstructing the whole road, to a $2 million project, focusing just on the culvert first. Next, Nippo Brook Culvert, Swains Lake Causeways, Toll End Road, Deer Ridge, Malago Road, moved to 2026. You'll remember these were originally presented as a 2025 project in last year's funding plan. We had a large bond proposed to do so, and the approval of warrant articles and the bond in 2024 gave the select board the indication that, hey, maybe we ought not come back to a bond the next year. We'll give a cooling off period and focus on future priorities. So that's why we're doing that. Richardson Pond Dam, also moving that to 2026. The ecological study is still underway. We won't be ready in time to present a proposal for 2025. DES, Dam Bureau, is not on our back. They're happy with the progress. And so that train is progressing slowly but surely. We're going to remove the new voting machines at the October 7th meeting. The select board identified funding for those in the 2024 budget and grant funding. We're going to move public safety building design, engineering, and impact fee study to 2026. So I continue to believe that it is important that we fully design that building before bringing it to voters, that we don't just bring a bond proposal in front of voters, designing with a partial plan. And so to do so, we will need money. And to get that money, we need to ask voters for it. We're not asking anything in 2025. So in 2026, I'd like to ask voters for that money. And so move that to 2026. Excuse me. I'd like to remove the public safety building roof replacement and just include that in the scope of the $5 million renovation addition. Talk to the facility manager about this. We don't need to have duplicative CIP entries. And so the best way to replace the roof of the public safety building is during a renovation or addition. We're not going to do them as separate projects. The caveat is if residents consistently deny a public safety building renovation addition, there will be a point where we need to replace that roof before a renovation addition. And so that's the small caveat there. If that CIP entry isn't accomplished within, say, 5 years, we'll have to replace the roof, and keep that in mind. Highway addition to the rear building, we're moving that to within 7 to 10 years. That is not a near-term priority. We have sufficient capacity in the garage to park our existing fleet. We expect our fleet to grow as we lose winter contractors, and we expect to expand the maintenance activities that we perform as a town. But those are not near-term. We're not going to accomplish those in the near term, and so that's a longer-term solution. We're going to reduce the recreation bicycle pump track net cost to $300,000. I think that was erroneously listed as $3 million instead of $300,000. So the initial proposal showed about $3 million in additional capital costs, which are not. That it isn't reflective of what was requested. Okay, questions on those changes? Dannon.
That recreation, that come out of the TIF?
Excellent point. Yes. So,
potential.
Yep. Other questions on the recommended changes, and then we'll get into funding to include answering that question in detail. Okay, moving on. Funding recommendations. So, here's what we need to keep in mind. This town does an excellent job at preparing for the mid cost range of our capital needs, right? Every piece of equipment, as soon as we buy a new truck, fire truck, highway truck, whatever, we add it to our CIP for the end of the useful life of that piece of equipment, and we establish a funding plan through capital reserve contributions so we can fund that entire equipment replacement schedule. It is a fantastic system. It works well. We pay cash for vehicles. We don't have interest costs. Aren't making lease payments. It's terrific. We do a fantastic job. So the basis of a lot of funding for the items in this CIP is really just either establishing or maintaining appropriate levels of capital reserve contributions, which we have a great history of doing. I said we'd talk in more detail about those contributions from my budget presentation, and I'll read through the list and we'll go over those. But there are other funding sources as well, right? These big infrastructure projects, we're very hopeful we'll be able to secure some level of offsetting grant funds. And so that's terrific that we're able to do that. The Bridge and Culvert Capital Reserve we use primarily for engineering, so that we can engineer these projects, we can fully design them, and then we can go try to get funding or, whatever the situation may be. And so for some projects, there are layered levels of funding. Dannon brought up an excellent point about some of the recreation proposals, especially stuff that may end up in the town center. TIF funding will be eligible for those. Similarly, the Recreation Revolving Fund, they just funded that pavilion going up on Ramsdale from the Recreation Revolving Fund. So we're able to accomplish a lot of these capital projects with various funding sources, with strategic planning and some forethought. There are other projects which are simply too big to save for and approach in that way, and that's where bonding comes in. And we don't have a history of that in Barrington, so that's going to be a tough sell, and we'll talk to that when I get to it on the bullet point. First, I want to maintain a $200,000 contribution for dam repair engineering in 2025. Fortunately, after 2025, we'll be able to reduce that contribution to the capital reserve to like $25,000, maybe even $20,000, because the two big projects we have to do, we have money for, we're going to do next year, and we'll be able to move on and just save for future projects down the road. We need to maintain $200,000 contribution in Bridge and Culvert Capital Reserve. Again, we're doing our engineering. We're taking these projects as far as we can, getting them shovel ready. That gives us the best opportunity to find additional funding. I want to present a $150,000 warrant article in 2026 for the Public Safety Building Design Engineering Impact Fee Study. Talked about that. I want to present a $200,000 warrant article in 2026 for the Richardson Pond Dam replacement. These are wildly estimated costs right now, but this is one of those layered fundings where we would have some funding from a warrant article, some funding from the Conservation Fund, and right now I've got it earmarked $400,000. We'll see where that evolves once we get the ecological study, once we know if we're reconstructing it or removing it. There's many unknowns, but I think we should plan on that being a 2026 initiative. Okay, the bond. We really have no history to indicate how the community will feel about tackling these big infrastructure projects. And unfortunately, this $13 million list of infrastructure projects has accumulated over many years, maybe even multiple generations in this town, because it's a tough pill to swallow. But this select board staff now, we have done an excellent job at taking projects that have been swept under the rug for years, pulling them out one by one, doing it right, and moving on permanently. Especially with road improvements. We just reconstructed Ramsdale Lane, which has been blowing up ever since it was originally built. The crest of the hill on Oak Hill was a problem ever since it was connected. Malago, we've got a good plan to fix that. We're fixing these problems for good. It takes money, and the proposal that I have is to bundle all of those projects into a bond to be presented in, not 2025. That's supposed to say 2026. I apologize.
Yeah. Thank you.
The original plan was 2025, but in 2026. Now, the logic behind this, as we've discussed, is that a resident that doesn't drive on Deer Ridge isn't going to be interested in spending $1.5 million reconstructing it. But if we take these projects from all corners of the town, bundle them together, residents, we ought to be able to explain to residents the value in an investment in all of this infrastructure. And by 2026, we will have most of these projects fully designed. We'll be able to have before and after comparisons. We'll be able to have full transparency about what the proposal is, and hopefully we'll be able to reduce that $13 million based on available grant funding.
And so, can we use any of the culvert funding for the Nickel Brook?
Absolutely. So any of
So that
the
would come
available
down.
balance from the Bridge and Culvert Capital Reserve could be used as matching funds for grants, which is probably the more likely avenue, or to continue progressing the design further and further to make it shovel ready. When it comes to, we'll never have enough in there to do one of the whole projects. I wouldn't recommend that actually, because having some money available for matching funds as grants come about will be really important, and having that as cash on hand will allow us to be timely. Okay, moving on from that one. $5 million bond in 2027 now for the public safety building. We go 2026 for design. We bring that full design for a bond in 2027. Now, this is problematic because now we're getting into the projections for the elementary school also, right? We're talking about a $13 million bond one year, a $5 million bond the next year. So we need to give some thought about how practical this approach really is. These are needs. I believe this is the order of those needs, but I just want to put that on your radar. Maintain $300,000 annual contribution to Highway Heavy Equipment Capital Reserve through 2026. So that means 2 more years at $300,000. Fortunately, based on how we've been updating our equipment, we should be able to reduce that to $150,000 starting in 2027. So good news there. Maintain $100,000 contribution to the Fire Truck Capital Reserve through 2025, then increase to $150,000 for 26 and 27, and then increase again to $200,000 through 2031. So this is because that second fire engine replacement we are not on track to meet the needs to fund that replacement. That was originally identified by the Advisory Budget Committee a couple of years ago. Importantly, you heard from the fire chief today about alternative solutions. It's possible that we end up rebuilding one of our fire engines instead of replacing it. Now, that may shorten the replacement schedule where it comes back onto the schedule, but that will likely change our need to increase some of those capital reserve contributions. So, none of these are set in stone, just projections. $10,000 to fire rescue equipment. We've been doing that forever. Okay, we're going to talk about this in a minute, so we don't need to get into the details, but I want to establish and maintain $150,000 in annual contributions to a facilities improvement capital reserve. We have great facilities. We've got new facilities. We have traditionally not really done a fantastic job of planning for the maintenance of our facilities. When issues come up, we address them, we find the money, we get it taken care of, but we haven't done it in an organized way. That's why I came to you and asked for a working facilities manager. We have a working facilities manager, we have good facility maintenance plans, but now we need to fund them.
Make clear to the voters that all of those reserve funds are in interest-bearing accounts.
Yes.
I think that that's important as well. We're not just putting it aside, we're putting it in funds that return investment, and they're building over.
Excellent point. Yep, we can make that clear.
People
Yep.
But facilities improvements also include.
Absolutely. Yep. Excellent. Good question. Okay, we're on page 14 of 16. Letter K, establish and maintain 20,000 in annual contributions to a parks maintenance and expansion capital reserve. We will talk about that again as an agenda item separate, but very, very important as we grow those services to the community. Utilize 50,000 in uncommitted ARPA balance towards security improvements at the community center, with the 31,000 balance being included in the renovation budget. You remember that when we went over our available uncommitted balance of ARPA funds earlier in the year, we said about 30-something thousand. So they got an updated quote from what it would take to expand that security system to the library space as well. And the new quote is about 81,000.
From 32 to 80.
Well, 32 for just downstairs, and then 81 for everything. Now they've got the entire building to have cameras inside and out, and all the extra doors. And so, yeah, it's a big component, but it is it couldn't be more important. We have been lacking. We've been making improvements. But anyway, so I'm suggesting that the select board increase the commitment from ARPA funds, which we can get under agreement. We already have the proposal before the end of this year, to 50,000, and then the remainder come from the building budget.
And that work will be done by the end of.
It'll be done by the end of 2026. We just need to be under agreement. We need to have a signed contract with the
But
vendor.
the library timeline, I mean, the rec department, I know they got pushed back a year.
Oh, yes. Yep. Excellent point. Yeah. So we're actually still working with the contractor to find the most appropriate schedule. They actually may do some of the work on the rec side before the library moves out based on when they have pockets of availability. But the work on the library will certainly happen after they leave. Yep. And they expect that they'll be able to do most of that work within 6 months or so. So maybe even before 2026, but certainly by the end.
I guess we're going to talk about this later, but a new roof is part of that, because I saw a new roof on, I think, planning boards.
Yeah. Yeah. So that is, so here's the trade-off, right? With the community center budget, Rob brought up energy efficiency improvements, and we have an energy audit of that building and a list of a wish list of ways to address energy efficiency items. We also have a scope that we're proposing with adding the stairs and the elevator and the community rooms and moving the offices. We recently found out that there has been moisture infiltration in the floor, and so that floor will eventually need to be replaced. And so we won't be able to do everything that building needs with the $1.5 million budget that we have. And so Carino, as I know from firsthand experience, does a fantastic job with value engineering proposals. And so they will give us a list of this is what it costs to do these things, and you can prioritize, move up and down the ladder. We need to prepare for needs at that facility, capital needs at that facility, that won't be accomplished with a $1.5 million budget. They're not necessary to be done now, but things like the roof. The roof will need to be replaced, and we should have money for that. The specifics of what we're paying for through the capital reserve or through a potential capital reserve and what we're paying through the $1.5 million budget may shift as we do that value engineering, and we may not have needs in 2025 for the community center building, but we need to prepare for the future needs of that building also. Yep, a point being. Okay, last one here. Increase annual contribution to the Transfer Station Recycling Center Capital Reserve to $50,000 starting in 2026. So you got a teaser in the CIP of what the report from the engineer on recommendations for that facility will be, because there are additional capital projects listed in there. We knew this all along, that it would be costly to do all of the improvements over the years for that facility, but we've been waiting for specifics to increase the level of funding. The Transfer Station Recycling Center Review Committee, led by the Transfer Station Administrator, will be making a presentation to the Select Board with those recommendations. So there'll be more information on this to come, but the proposal is to increase that to $50,000 annually to start saving the money necessary to address those recommendations, should the Select Board support them. Okay, so that establishes that A through M of a funding proposal establishes funding for the vast majority of projects in the CIP. The ones left out, obviously the school projects, And also some of the recreation projects, which may be funded either from tax increment financing or the revolving fund or some combination of grant funding or et cetera. I don't mean to say non-essential in the sense that it is important to the community, but non-essential to the extent that we need to be raising money for it right now, separate than the Parks Maintenance Capital Reserve. So looking for the support from the select board in those changes and the funding plan. And then finally, it might be a good idea to have a joint meeting with the planning board to kind of like review a final draft, everybody get on the same page, clear up any, misunderstandings of priorities or expectations. And so if there's support from the select board on that, I might propose doing that at the November 4th meeting. We're not going to have a super heavy agenda since we're meeting more regularly. I think we could dedicate most of the meeting to that exercise. And we spend, 45 minutes, maybe an hour, having a joint meeting with the planning board members that are available for that meeting to finalize and put a double stamp on the CIP and call it done. So,
How does the board feel on that?
oh, you got to turn your microphone the other direction, I think.
I'm not on. I just want to remember that the next day we're at the polls. So as long as we can ensure that that meeting will not be as long as tonight's meeting, I think certainly we could go ahead with that.
Excellent.
Support for the recommended changes and the funding plan.
Yes.
General nods?
Yes.
Yeah, will this be presented? Should we bring this to the ABC tomorrow?
My plan was to take the finalized document to the ABC.
Okay.
In the future, I would like the process to start with the ABC, meeting over the summer and making recommendations, especially on the funding side of it, and then go through the planning select board and then end up back at the budget committee at the end of the process as well. But we don't, those timelines don't align right now. So I'm thinking finalized document this year. The timing will work out well with that built-in buffer meeting to spend some time discussing it then. Good question, though.
How will the total warrant price tag differ in these years? Is that summary?
Okay, so yes, I have an idea. I don't have it available, but in your budget binder, and I can pull it up on the screen up here, but in the budget binder is a document that shows the historical contributions to capital reserves. Maybe what I can do is add to that and show potential future contributions based on that funding plan. Maybe that would be helpful.
Projected,
If the funding plan is supported.
Yes, for everything.
Yeah, I like that suggestion. I just want to pull it up to make sure that we're happy with it showing up in this format. Historical separate warrant article analysis. I'm going to go share so you guys can see it. Okay. Yeah, you're not going to be able to see it. I don't know what I was thinking. It's.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you remember that from the binder? Yeah. Okay. So let's just zoom in to 2019 because it's right next to each other. But what I did is I took and I showed the operating budget, what the operating budget amount was, and then I had voter support in here because I had the data and I thought that would be interesting to kind of see alongside everything. And then I listed all of the capital reserve contributions and some one-time warrant articles so we could kind of see like a history of these things. And then the amount, so it shows the subtotal separate warrant articles and then the total with the operating budget and other warrant articles, and then any notes from that year. But yeah, if you scroll forward, for 2025, I included on here. But maybe I just keep going. And
I think that format's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good one.
So maybe I'll extend that out and show. Okay. Yeah. Good suggestion.
Excellent. You all set?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Every select board's good.
Okay. New business. Parks Maintenance Capital Reserve proposal. Discussion only. Just to give a couple quick points on this. Definitely needed with our newly purchased lot, the 13-acre lot. And in addition to how we're evolving and having more of these parks and recreational areas. So just really looking to see if you guys support a capital reserve for parks and recreation.
Yeah, I think that's.
Any additional,
when we
any
previously
additional,
discussed it,
I think it's wise planning.
And we're not asking the voters a very large amount of money this year, right? What did we put down for?
20,000.
20,000. Yeah. Kind of softens the blow.
yep. Okay, with nothing,
The only thing that needs to be said is this is the evolution of Barrington's Recreation Department. There should be conference sessions developed around how Barrington Recreation has taken a strategic plan process, implemented it, grown the department, provided additional services, taken on additional responsibilities, and almost a tremendous amount of credit goes to our recreation director, Jesse Tennis. And this evolution has happened incrementally over time. But that recreation department today is a Parks and Recreation department, period. And it has, that evolution is happening, right? They're looking at a rebranding to identify themselves as such. I mean, there isn't a grand ribbon cutting of, oh, hey, tomorrow they're Parks and Recreation. They're Parks and Recreation today. But steps like this are help address some of those, I don't want to say growing pains, but some of those necessary support steps in supporting this Parks and Recreation department, which has grown tremendously, provides a tremendous level of service to the community. So
One of the biggest assets.
absolutely. So kudos to them and all the staff supporting them, and thanks to the select board for the support.
We've got Amy Pearl to be part of
perfect.
I missed that.
the television show.
Oh,
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
sorry.
Me
I've
too.
never watched it either, but
Okay.
I know about it.
Yep, thank you.
Awesome. So definitely think there's support from the board on that. New business, C, facilities capital reserve proposal. We just heard a little bit about it today. We know we've neglected our buildings throughout the years, and I definitely think this is a wise decision. Any other
Already kind of
discussion from the
discussed.
board?
No, I mean, we're making investments. We built this building. We're building out that building. We've got to keep things.
Maintained.
And I'm really proud of this, right? So we have, by facility, a list of projects, estimated prices, notes, a description of the need. This level of facility maintenance plan was George Bailey's dream, right? George worked his whole career in facility maintenance, and it always bothered him that we never had facility maintenance plans for our town. And so we have that, and it's excellent. So
I just want to add,
proud of that.
Jim Anderson's been great.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Great addition, and,
Yep.
Hats off for that too.
No question. Yep.
For
You just
for
send
a
this to George.
municipality with as much growth as is happening, very lucky staff that we get.
And I have heard that from the library community a lot. He's been very involved in the work of the building committee and managing the.
Great with the energy committee.
Yep, so
Speaking of energy, are our solar panels construction happening?
close. There's still a few procedural steps to get them fully commissioned, but they will be soon.
Okay, D is already taken care of, so we are on to select board member reports.
ABC met Tuesday, we're meeting tomorrow, forever and ever on Tuesday. Same time the library met on Tuesday. They have the contract for the work at 1.895 and change, 896 basically, which is a little less than they projected for the building cost.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Less is more. That's fabulous.
That's right. They're all low bids, many of them local. I won't mention the electrical, but there are other locals done, so congratulations there. They still talk about things they need to do. There's some shelving costs They're gonna reupholster the chairs for $7,500. Reupholster the chairs, for example.
Wow.
These are not real chump change, but they're kind of nickel
And
and
Cook's
dime stuff.
Upholstery has gone out of business because they used to do a lot of.
Yeah, no, there's
stuff for
security
businesses.
things, but they've started work. They're gonna work on, get it cleared so they can work all winter. So there'll be some costs like propane for heaters and that sort of thing. They anticipate mid to late June to move in.
Wow, how
Great.
exciting.
That's pretty exciting stuff. I sat through that whole meeting and therefore missed the school board meeting, which was also that day. But
3 in a
Rick-
day.
Rick gave, yeah, it's a free meeting Tuesday, so,
Is the corporate budget planning open to the public?
yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I don't think the support documents, are the support documents available?
No, I don't get them. I don't know. They must be available somewhere, but I don't know where they are.
Okay.
I don't see, like I say, I couldn't make Tuesday's meeting because I was doing the library. I thought I ought to stay for the library meeting. Have about an hour. And what other committee? Oh, the transportation committee will keep getting put off, but we'll have a report next meeting.
Excellent. Select person, Hyderkoff.
I got off the hook because I'm not receiving.
I was not able to make the last planning board meeting, but as you see, most of planning board lately has been dealing with class 6 and private road applications.
I don't have a lot to update. I was away at a 7-day conference in Nashville. So Dan,
7
and
days.
thank you for being at the library building committee meeting. And Connor was at the last conservation commission meeting, presenting and they voted on the conservation officer, which is great.
Absolutely.
And Energy is working on their survey, which should be available for election day.
If any select board member has input on the survey, it's fantastic. I sent out a draft later this afternoon. I read through it. They did a fantastic job. But if select board has input as kind of like a bystander's
I haven't
perspective,
read it yet. I saw your email. but-
don't hesitate. They welcome that.
The Fall Fest for the rec department, that was pretty much the big highlight in talking with Jesse. Huge hats off to her. DCDC, we're cooking up some things. There might even be like I don't want to leak information, but get excited. Stuff for people to come gather. The Trails Committee is, the joint trails, working on the GIS mapping and getting that all figured. So that's all really cool to see on the overlay. Other than that, Connor steals my thunder every meeting now.
I just gotta go punt those to you.
Yeah.
Too much exciting stuff.
Yeah, I know. And that's all I have. So with the crowd here in studio and online, I'm going to open up public comment.
Well, I want to thank you for your work along our landscape property.
Matt Moores,
Yes.
member of the Rec Commission and Barrington Center Development Committee.
Oh, hey, glad
So
we could
thank
do
you
it.
both for
Yeah,
that.
thank you.
Many people in my neighborhood have been down there walking and making videos. Facebook page of the walks they're doing.
That's
The
super
trail
awesome.
is really lovely.
Glad to hear it. Okay, with that, I'm going to open up public comment. I don't see anybody in studio. There's nobody in studio minus us. And nobody online, so I'm going to go ahead and close public comment.
And move adjournment.
Second,
Hardtop aye.
roll call.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, yes, for this one. Aye.
Capiello, aye.
Give us an eye.
Sakoshai.